Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Old Bridge Township Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for June 4th, 2020. I'm James Sullivan. As chairman of the board, I'd like to ask you now, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Old Bridge Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting by prominently posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, the date, the location, and the agenda of this meeting. Also by mailing such announcement Home News and Tribune, filing a copy of the announcement with the municipal clerk, and posting this meeting on the township website. Ms. Silverman, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Dewhurst?
here.
Mr. Connor? I know I saw him. Ms. Kilduff?
Here.
Mr. Scogno?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Psychowski?
Here.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Sachs? Mr. Sachs? I know.
Here. Sorry.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Here.
Ms. Sawant?
Here.
Mr. Hart? Mr. Lavallo?
Here.
Ms. Drum?
Here.
And me, Kim Silverman.
Thank you, Ms. Silverman. This meeting is being conducted electronically via the internet by a webinar. It is unique and it will take patience on all involved as we are no longer gathered together, but doing so from our own homes and offices. This meeting is also being televised by OBTV channel 15 on the cable network, as well as YouTube. I remind those watching on TV at home or on YouTube that there's up to a 30-second delay in communication. That would be important to remember if you wish to personally join the public portion. Anyone calling in must lower their TV or you'll be confused by the time delay. I would ask all participants now, please silence your cell phones at this juncture to avoid any disturbances. Right now, if you're watching at home on cable TV and on YouTube, you're going to see a virtual zoning board meeting information put up in front of you with phone numbers. That'll be important if you wish to call in during the public portions. Please make note of that. It will be shown many times during the meeting. The meeting itself will follow the same protocols as is normal for the zoning board. There are some general housekeeping matters to start, which will be followed by 3 applications this evening. Between the second and third application, there will be a 5-minute recess, and that will be for the benefit of the stenographer who takes all the information down and the professionals and the board members. So it will continue on after that. As in all applications, there's a public portion that follows the testimony. If you have particular interest in any application, and you wish to ask questions via telephone, again, I suggest you take notes during the presentation to refresh your memory. Now would be a good time to get your paper and pen ready. There's a certain protocol that we follow. Applicants usually, and this evening you'll see that, are represented normally by professionals, by an attorney and probably by engineers and planners. Those men or women will make a presentation before the board. After each presentation, normally the professionals from the township, our planner, our engineer, the fire marshal, etc., may want to ask questions of that witness. After that time, I would ask all the board members who might be interested, who have anything to question each individual about, to do that. We would then go on to each and every witness that the applicant is going to present. After all those witnesses have testified, we will open a public portion. So please be patient. This does take time. That public portion is important to you. If you have something to say, That's what you're looking at on the screen in front of you. And that's when we will ask you to call in. Our planner, Ms. Vina Sawant, is the moderator. They're controlling the phone calls in and controlling the actions of the cameras and the board members to be muted or unmuted. So please be patient. We will get to everyone. The first thing that's going to happen is she's going to recite the last four numbers of the number that calls in. If that is you, we're going to ask you to state your name. After you state your name, the board attorney has to swear you in order for you to be able to testify in front of the board. So please be patient. It's very simple once you get used to it. If you're watching at home, you'll see how it works. If perhaps you're the last application that you're interested in or the second one. So please be patient. At this time, I want to ask Ms. Sawant to say all the things that I forgot to say tonight. Ms. Sawant.
Good evening, all. I think Chairman Sullivan, you have covered everything, but I just want to reiterate, we are live on OBTV. We are aired on OBTV channel 15. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. To all panelists, please make sure that your face is in the middle of the viewing window, not too low, not too high. Ensure that there is ample light on your face so that you are seen on the screen. Zoning board members, please remember, you will be unmuted during first half of the meeting when you will be required to vote. The zoning board attorney, the chairman, zoning board secretary, and the court reporter will remain unmuted throughout the meeting. Everyone else will be muted once the presentations begin. The applicant's professionals will be asked to turn on their video and unmute themselves once it's their turn to testify. During the public commentary period, I will announce the last four digits of the caller's phone number or the last name of the caller. I will also announce the last four digits of the phone number of the next caller so that the person can be prepared. But please be patient. I'm carefully monitoring as you call in. So each one of you will get a chance. Please press *9 to raise your hand once it is time for public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sawant. Item number 2, board members, is minutes, and those are from March 5th, 2020. I'm sure everyone has had a chance to reread them. Absent any kind of commentary or suggestions for an addition or a deletion, I would ask someone to move this so we may memorialize those minutes.
Motion to approve, Connor.
Is there a second?
Who's second?
Second, Psychowski.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Psychowski,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. We have no resolutions this evening. Board members, under item 3, we'll move to item 4, and that's continuances. The first one is 4-2020Z at 69 Ravine Ave LLC. It's located at 69 Ravine Avenue for an addition to a single-family home that's going to require a C&D variance. The applicant is asking that matter to be continued to July 16, 2020 with further notice. If you had some interest and you're watching at home and the only reason you're watching is because of that, it's not going to be heard tonight. It will, however, be on the schedule for July 16th. The next continuance is 36-19Z. It's Jersey 34 Associates. That's at 593 New Jersey State Highway 34, block 3236.24, lot 2612. That is to construct a second building at 22,363 square foot to include 3 basketball courts, a locker, and bathrooms. Expansion of parking, requiring a preliminary and final major site plan with C&D variance. That matter, the applicant is asking it to be continued to July 16th, 2020, with further notice. Once again, if you had interest in that matter this evening, it is not going to be heard. It will be on the agenda July 16th with further notice. That does bring us then moving forward to our three applications for the evening. We're going to take them in order. The first one is 39-19Z. It's Janet Budge. That's at 47 Wood Shore West for an add a level addition requiring a D variance. This is in the R6.
My video.
This is a continuation of a matter from our previous meeting, and I believe we have Catherine Budge here tonight, correct?
Yes.
Can you hear me? And I can hear you okay. I would just remind you before we can move forward with it that you are still under oath from your previous testimony. Okay?
I understand.
For the record, please state your name and address again.
Catherine Budge, 419 Hoffman Station Road, Monroe Township, New Jersey.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sachs, my recollection is that we were going to contact an architect on this. Did that happen?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chairman, and I believe the architect is with us this evening. So if he can identify himself, and I guess we can also swear him in.
Okay, sir.
Yes, Ron Kazmarski.
All right, Mr. Kazmarski, I'm going to swear you in. Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Please state your affiliation for the record.
Okay, I'm a New Jersey licensed architect, and I worked on the plans for the Budge residence.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Chairman, I believe at the last hearing, Ms. Budge did give some limited testimony, but I know the board did request that the architect testify at tonight's hearing. So, Ms. Budge, if it's all right with you, I guess you want to turn it over to Mr. Kazmarski?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just for the record, Mr. Kazmarski, you are licensed in the state of New Jersey, correct?
Yeah, yes,
And you've testified before zoning boards or planning boards previous to this night?
numerous, yes.
We'll accept your expertise, sir. Why don't you go forward and try and help Ms. Budge out on what she really wants to put on the record here for the board.
Okay. So I see on my illustration, I'm seeing the plans. So basically, and I don't understand exactly what was in question, and speaking to her in a limited way on what we think some of the issues are, I guess it's the attic area. There's two areas that are unfinished attic areas, and they are going to be for storage, and it's listed as such on the plans in two areas, two distinct floor areas listed as storage. And I believe that's what was in question. So if there are any questions related to that issue.
Okay, I think the planner did have some because I believe there was some setbacks that were in question. And I think there was a question of the total square footage, either the property or the house. I'm going to go to Mr. Warren.
So the real issue was that your plans had indicated that the space above the living area is also an attic. And the zoning officer and myself, we determined that there is a height of 9 feet at the corner where the roof meets the wall, and there is enough headroom, so it's 9 feet. Typically, when it's an attic, it would be 5 feet or less. With 9 feet room, with windows on it, on that for that area, we would consider that as an additional room, and that should be included in the floor area calculations.
Okay.
For us, for the attic space or the storage space that is above the existing 2 bedrooms is a true attic space, and it should be excluded from the floor area calculations. However, the area that is newly created above the living area should be included in the floor area calculations.
Okay.
And I think that was something we weren't clear, because when the plans were filed with the zoning department, there was a section that was provided, a construction detail that really showed the height in every room. It was called a storage area, but that was questionable. And then when the plans were submitted to the planning department, the section, the construction was not, construction detail was not submitted to us, and it was just the elevation. But I had reviewed the construction details prior to getting the application when it was actually with the zoning department. So could you just clarify on the history of what happened?
Yeah, so my understanding in planning out this space was with the addition areas as they're laid out on the plan, is the use would be as shown as storage. So I understand that one of the areas shows dormers and dormers with windows, and I guess your concern is that is potential living space given the height and that area. But I understand the homeowner's intention as storage. So that's how, that's why it's depicted like that on the plan.
I think that they're talking about the area on the other side, not the dormer area.
Okay, so the other area, there's additional it's like an L configurated space that's listed as attic storage. So it's approximately 10'6" wide by 25'2" long, with an additional 7'10" wide by 10'3" area. So that calculation could be made to determine that square footage. But again, that's also listed as storage.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question then. So let's try to get the intent of the property owner. So is any of that attic area going to be utilized as habitable area, or is it all going to be storage?
None of it is going to be used as habitable area.
Okay. And you would agree to a condition then, if the board were to act favorably, that area will not be habitable, it will just be used for storage?
Yes.
Okay.
Larry, if you may, can I interrupt?
Yes.
So, Ms. Budge, the one, I know at the last meeting you had testified that the intention is to finish the house, or probably sooner or later sell the house, correct?
Correct.
So do you understand that if you have that restriction on the space above the living area, the new buyer too cannot use that space? It's an additional 600 square feet, but that prohibits anybody, whether it's you or the new buyer, from using that space.
That's fine. That's fine. We have no intention of doing it. And when it's sold, the new buyer will be informed that that is the restriction, and he'll be buying it with that restriction placed on it.
Okay.
Anything else?
That is the case, and the living space above the space above the living room is not going to be included, is not going to be a habitable space, then they wouldn't even need the floor area ratio variance. But the question, or I think it is for the board to decide, it has a headroom of 9 feet. It is 600 square feet. It has windows. To me, that's still a habitable space. And I think the ask is not significant, because the zone allows an FAR of 0.35. With the addition of the 600 square feet above the living space, the proposed floor area ratio is 0.4. So if the architect, if the owner can justify the size of the house, my recommendation would be that you're already in front of the zoning board, you're asking for a floor area ratio. Why not use it as a habitable floor area?
Uh,
Well,
The real question is that if it was a storage area, it has windows, it has a headroom of 9 feet. And what happens is, yes, you probably may not use that space for living purposes and you use it for storage. But when you sell the house, how do we as the town monitor whether somebody is using that space as a room or not?
well,
But so this is Ron, the architect. And so if I can jump in, so with the design of the addition and with the curb appeal in mind and creating that additional space and creating the dormers, having that area, large area without windows, without any roofline modifications, wouldn't be as appealing for the house. But if I'm understanding what you're saying, it may make sense since it's there and we have the design with the roof lines and the windows, and we're before the board for that consideration of a small additional area, it may behoove the owner to request the variance for that square footage, understanding that they in the future may have the ability to utilize that space as living space, and then certainly have the advantage of selling the house, realizing additional living square footage.
Yeah, Mr. Kazmarski, I agree with you 100%. Certainly, I think the property owner would want to maximize the usable space on this property. It would certainly make it more appealing for purposes of resale. So, Mrs. Budge, I think you probably don't want it to be a condition of approval that that area cannot be habitable. As long as we delineate that that one area will be habitable. And Mr. Kazmarski, if you can just recalculate what the FAR would be, and I'm not asking you to do it tonight necessarily, but if you could recalculate what the FAR would be on that basis, then I think we solved that problem.
Okay, I can certainly do that. And then, so we'll end up with additional living space in that dormered area, and then we would reserve the other area as storage.
Right.
So that would be maintained, but we'd be increasing our FAR. And I agree, it's somewhere in the 0.4 area, which represents a variance to a minor extent.
Based
Dina,
on
do you know
my
offhand-
calculation,
I'm sorry. Do you know offhand what the FAR would be?
it is 0.40.
Yes,
0.40?
yep, yep,
Okay, fine.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
All right,
right,
fine.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Ms. Fudge, I think these matters occasionally do come before the board, either from homeowner confusion or other intent, and they kind of come to seek forgiveness rather than ask permission. And in this case, this isn't your home, but I know it was your brother's and your sister-in-law's present home. And probably with a little bit of intentions, they wanted to expand room in there, but just didn't do it in the right way. It probably would not be in your best interest, as you've been told by the professionals, if your sister-in-law wants to sell that house, no one's going to buy it knowing that you can't make it a livable space. So
no, I understand that having it available as living space would be much more beneficial, but
well, the board will make that decision whether to approve it or not. But for you to lock yourself in and not get a fair shot because no one's going to buy that house.
right, no, that is the better situation.
And you've heard that from the board attorney as well, who really doesn't have to give you that advice. I have as a civilian and
No, I appreciate that advice.
So he's probably giving you the best advice as well as Ms. Salone.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Mr. Sachs, do we need anything further on the record?
Yeah, the only other thing, I'm just looking at the memorandum. I think there was a question in paragraph 4 about the height of the proposed structure. I guess, Mr. Kazmarski, can you just confirm what the height is?
Right, so the overall height was not modified. The existing height was 26 feet, the proposed is 26. although the roof lines were modified to realize more space inside the roof line, the ridge is consistent. So there's not a height modification.
All right. And I guess the last question I had is, and I'm sure you're familiar with the property, you've obviously seen the neighborhood. I'm sure the type of home that you're constructing and that you've designed here is not out of character in the surrounding area and
No.
would be compatible with the scale and style of other homes in the neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay. That's all for me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. One, as far as the red line on the use variance, the last line, it says the application form indicates that the proposed house is 3181 square foot. Is that, do we have a contradiction there, or is that satisfactory?
So, Chairman, actually, I would recommend that when the plans are submitted to the planning department, like the final plans, the architect thoroughly go through the submission, because there were some inconsistencies in the number. It were in multiple places. So make sure that the square footage is right in every place, so that it's consistent and, we can move forward. But I'm sure I can work with you and point out each of those discrepancies.
Sure.
And there is one thing, Chairman, I just want to sum it up, because this was an unusual situation where I just want to briefly tell the board that the house is already built. The second floor has been built. The attic has been built. That is that is one of the reason why I asked Miss Budge to include the space that is above the family room. Is it is very difficult for us once the approval is granted to monitor such spaces, whether it's habitable or not. In the last 2 years, the planning department has worked diligently to try and remove any discrepancies in the ordinance so that it's much clearer, because as you all recollect, there used to be situations where finished basement versus unfinished basements, whether it's included in the floor area ratio or not. When it is an attic space, especially, it becomes challenging because homeowners say that the headroom is more than 5 feet now, and it is still an attic, whereas usually the zoning officer and my stand is anything above 5 feet should be included in the floor area ratio. In this case, because the house is built, I wanted the applicant to just testify if there are other homes in the neighborhood that have similar features. And Ms. Butch did submit some pictures she took, and if the board may wish, I can produce them as exhibits. She did make that submission to me as exhibits.
By all means, Mr. One, and I toured that neighborhood and I saw similar problems. I can attest to that.
Ms. Budge, as I shared the screen and put up the images, if you may, please just give us the approximate location so that it helps the board.
Okay, I can do that.
Larry, we're going to mark these.
Yeah, let's mark it as A1. How many photographs are there, Vina? We'll mark them as
8 of them.
8 of them. All right, so we'll mark the
About.
series of 8 photographs as A1. That's fine. Okay, Vina, if you want to put them back on the screen.
Aren't the plans A1, Larry?
What's that?
Isn't the architectural plan A1?
I don't think we marked anything last time.
Okay.
First one.
This house is on Woodshore East, which would be the house, the next street over on to the right. And it just showed the size of the house and the property lot line. That driveway belongs to the house next to it. It's hard to see. There's a fence there, but I was taking these pictures with my phone, so.
I'll go to the next one.
This house is two pictures, this picture here and the next one, which shows the extension on it, and they're both right at the lot line. And this is on Ocean Boulevard. This is 2 streets behind the development. This house is on Raritan Boulevard, which is 2 streets behind. There is one house that I submitted that is also in the process of being built. You can see there's no siding or anything on it, which is on the same street as Stevens.
Mr. Kazmarski, can you mute yourself for a second? Because when you turn the
Oh,
pages,
oh, sorry.
no
Gotcha.
problem. Okay,
Sorry
thank you.
about
That's okay.
That's the same one. But this just shows like the lot line for this house. So you can see the fence where the lot line is. And on the other side, how close that house is. So that, you know, that house, lot size to house size.
Oh, pictures I had.
Is that it, Vina?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Board
Which-
members,
which-
I'm sure you're taking
yeah.
note of them as well.
Which makes it clear that the numerous houses in the neighborhood
Yep.
do experience those dormers and additional square footage on the upper level.
Anything else you want to testify before the board, Mr. Kazmowski?
Nope.
No.
That's
And
it.
Mr. Sachs, any questions of the architect? And I'm going to go to our board.
No, I'm good.
And how about Ms. Budge?
No, I'm good. I'm good too.
Questions to you, ma'am, not from you.
Oh. Okay, I'll
All right,
take it.
let's go to board members. I can see you all on the screen. If you have a question, just raise your hand in front of your face so I can acknowledge you. Okay. I see none. Okay. Ms. Budge, the next thing I would do is I would open the public portion of this to see if there's anyone in support or opposed to granting an approval. And then after I do that, I'm going to ask if you want us to take a vote. Okay.
Okay,
So at this time, at this time, I'm going to open up this matter to the public. You have to call in, and you should have those numbers. This action is at 47 Woodshore West. This is for an add a level on a home. If there's anyone interested in commenting on this matter or questioning this matter, please call in on one of the phone numbers. We'll wait approximately, I think, 30 to 45 seconds, Vina.
Oh, 30 seconds.
Okay.
No hands.
I see no hands raised.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Swanton, Ms. Silverman. We can go back then. Ms. Budge, would it be your desire for us to take a vote on this matter tonight?
yes, please.
Okay. Mr. Sachs, this is only a D4, right? The bulks are pre-existing non-conforming, or would we?
Yeah, the bulks are all pre-existing non-conforming. Let me just double check, but I believe they are.
Yeah, that's what I read.
Yeah, we're not creating new anybody. Yeah, so it would just really be the FAR, the D4 variance.
Okay, but we wouldn't put the bulks on as just the pre-existing non-conforming. We don't need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you know what we can do, just to play it safe, let's vote for the D4 and we'll vote for the bulks also as pre-existing.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sachs. My board members, you've heard, this is for D4 floor area ratio going from 0.35 to 0.40. And we know the location, we know this has been built already. I don't think it's been totally finished, but it's sheathed, it hasn't been completely finished. So someone in favor of approving this, please indicate by moving this.
Motion.
Ms. Geldof moves it. Is there a second?
Second, Connor.
Second by Connor. Roll call, Ms. Silverman?
Kim, roll call.
Kim's muted, that's why.
Muted.
There we go. No, you're still muted, Kim.
Okay.
There you go.
Mr. Dewhurst? He was there before.
He's there.
John,
I think you need to unmute yourself.
yeah, there you go.
There you
Go
go.
ahead, John.
No, he keeps going back and forth.
Now you're okay, John. Go ahead. With your vote.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Are you wearing
His
headphones,
microphone, his
Mr.
audio may
Dewhurst?
not be on. John, is your audio on? Look on
John,
your
if you
screen.
can hear us, raise your hand.
Can you hear us?
Okay, John, are you wearing earphones without a microphone? No? Okay, we can't hear you. If you're in favor, would you please raise your hand? Okay, thank you.
That's a yes.
Yes, the board will take
Mr.
notice of Mr. Dewhurst and vote in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. Sacks.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Keldorf?
Yes.
Mr. Scogno?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Zakowski?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Kazmarski, thank you very much for cooperating and making a presentation on the applicants.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to vote on the C variances also?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I asked if we should and I
What
didn't.
C variances do we have?
The
Well, they're
bulks.
pre-existing nonconformities, but this way we've protected Mrs. Budge, so we'll do that.
Sorry about
Okay.
that. I'll move them. Is there a second?
Second, Walker.
Second by Walker. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
His thumb is up again?
Yes. Mr. Sacks, do you recognize that as the affirmative?
Mr.
Yeah.
Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Keldorf?
Yes.
Mr. Scogno?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Zakowski?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, now I'll thank you, Mr. Kazmarski, for representing the applicant.
You're very welcome.
And Ms. Budge, it was very, very nice of you to stand in for your sister-in-law, taking into account what happened. So.
Well, I
you
would thank
very-
the board for allowing me to.
Well, thank you very much, ma'am. You make a great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. You're going to have to apply for your permits. Please inform your sister-in-law.
I will
Okay.
do it as soon as the COVID's over.
Okay. This will be written, the approval would be next month, right, Larry?
Yes.
Right. The
Okay.
resolution doesn't get written up until next month. So.
I understand.
Yeah. Best of luck to you and best of luck to your sister.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the whole board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, we're going to move on to our next application for the evening. Is the stenographer, Debbie, are you ready?
Here,
Okay.
Mr. Sullivan?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
I'm going to recuse myself from this application. I was a former member of this pistol club and had a problem with the management.
No, this is.
Wait.
Hey, Bruce, don't leave yet. We're going to do the Pistol Club last. So
Okay.
we're going to do Vision. So you'll
You're
have an
not
early
doing
evening.
yourself in Vision, are you?
We'll start with Vision.
We're doing Vision right now. Okay, this is 37-19Z Vision Old Bridge 3 LLC. Block 8002, lot 13, located at 105 Old Mattawan Road. It's a major site plan preliminary and final with a C&D variance. This is for a 6-story assisted independent community. The Highland Pape firm is representing the applicant, and of counsel is Mr. Peter Clauser. Mr. Clauser.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
sir, we can.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes, this is a continuation of the Vision Old Bridge application. It's a proposal of a site plan and use variance relief for an independent living facility and a assisted living facility in one building. Last time that we were here, we presented my opening remarks describing the application, the operations testimony, and Scott Turner completed the engineering testimony. And then the application was open to the public. This evening, I think the game plan is to have Mr. Zangali come back, answer a couple of questions, just clarify a few things that were raised very briefly. Then have Peter Peretta, the architect, describe the building. I think his testimony is rather brief. and then have Frank Miskovich, who's worked on this project and has worked with, not with, but in response to your traffic experts' reports and has prepared some responses, have him testify. And then I think I understand it'll be the board's pleasure. We'll open up to the public. At that time, we'll save Allison and her concluding testimony for the July meeting. To that end, there's three things I'd like to point out about the application in response to some of the comments from the board. To make the independent living apartments more cohesive with the assisted living portion of it, the applicant would agree to age restrict those two top floor units to 55 and older. And then also, I think in order to make the application, make this proposed development on this property make a little bit more sense, create it as an inclusionary development. And I presented that to Vina, and she and I think can work on that. And it's another good reason why we should not carry, but continue the application to July after we complete the testimony that we complete this evening. So I think this building provides an opportunity to set the board up for some on-site affordable units that can be part of your future obligations that the town has to satisfy their affordable obligations. So those two, we're going to age restrict it. I think Larry and I can work on exactly how that could be framed, and we can present that to the board when we return exactly, but we will age restrict it and see how we can create affordables on site and give some credits to the town that can be used in the future. And then a minor thing, although I think important for the community, one of the members of the public last time mentioned that there's a bus stop in the area, or that the bus stop has migrated to this piece of property. And working with the community and your planner and your engineer will certainly create a place out on Matawan Road or School Street, wherever it is that they stop. I'm just guessing it's Matawan Road. That can be reserved to make sure that it's a bus stop for the children to be in a safe place, have a place to stand and wait for the bus, and that this development wouldn't interfere with what is existing now, and in fact would accommodate it. So those are three things that I just wanted to point out. I'd like to move to Bill, bring him up. I want him to clarify two issues that sort of came up last time. So if I could, I'd like to bring Bill back. He was sworn last time. I don't know if it's this board's preference to have him sworn again or simply remind him that he's under oath.
No, Mr. Zengoli, I'll remind you that you're still under oath.
Understand.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, during your presentation, you made a statement that this would be the only, this would only be the second independent living facility in Old Bridge. And there were members of the public that questioned that statement and indicated that a Google search would demonstrate that there are many facilities like this in Old Bridge. It's not accurate. You've explained it to me what the difference is between an independent living facility and some of the other services that are in Old Bridge. And I wonder if you could just sort of crystallize that for the board and share with them exactly what makes us different than the other facilities that are available in town, aside from the Reformed Church portion, which you mentioned before.
Sure. To be clear, assisted living facility, the independent is the.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
The question was, there are so many other facilities just like this in the area. Just to start off, the difference between an assisted living and a nursing home, and I'm going to be pretty brief. Biggest difference between the two types of senior housing centers, they revolve around medical services and the physical plant of each community. The residents of a nursing home require around-the-clock care and monitoring. They typically live with more complex health conditions that require the assistance of a skilled nurse or a physical or speech therapist. Some might require respiratory care services. There can be intravenous and feeding tubes. There can be things like wound vacuums and specialty beds for wound care, as well as things, other items like cardiac rehabilitation. contrast, the residents in an assisted living community generally require a different type of care, less medically intensive. It might be a person who lives with memory loss and isn't safe living alone, or an adult with mobility problems who needs a little help transferring from their bed to their favorite chair, or even into a wheelchair, or to stand up to use a walker. And typically they cannot prepare their own meals and they need medication assistance. The basics of how they differ in physical plant. One obvious difference, if you've been to visit a loved one or happen to have gone to a rehab facility for yourself, is that they look more institutional. You know, they're set up for that type of care. And you're usually sharing a room. An assisted living looks more like an upscale apartment community. The residents in an assisted living usually have their own apartment or suite. In our facility, we're talking all studios, and we had talked about the size of the studios before. And as far as the needs in the area, the Department of Health lists on their website all licensed facilities who are licensed under the Department of Health. In assisted living, there are, in the whole county, there are 11. Within Old Bridge, there's only one attached to the Reformed Church. There are 4 nursing facilities in Old Bridge proper. And in the county, there's 27 total nursing homes in the whole county. And there are 11 assisted living facilities in the whole county. And that ranges all the way up to Edison. And they range in size from 42 beds to 156. So our proposal is certainly much smaller. When you look at the demographics of the county, we have about 840,000 people in the total county. Old Bridge has about 65,000, and 11% are 70 years or older. 93,000 people in Middlesex County who are 70 or over. And when you go down to 60 or over, there's 124,000 people. We're looking to accommodate 50. So there's a little bit of room in there. If you look in comparison, Monmouth County, that's 630,000 people with 24% over 60. That's about, 150,000 people. They have 23 assisted livings and 33 nursing homes. And they all range in size from 50 to 199 beds. And there's a total of 56 long-term care facilities. That's the combined number of nursing homes and assisted livings together. And that's the basics of what we're looking at. We're looking to have an assisted living, not a skilled nursing facility. And as we stated, with independent 55-year and over apartments.
Thank you, Bill. One other thing we wanted to clarify for the board was in the architectural plans that were submitted, which Peter will discuss in a moment, the ground floor was shown as an open space because it was presented as architectural plans to show the board that there were open space. And your operation, the interior operation, the way that the building is laid out, safety concerns, all of that are controlled by state licensing, correct?
Correct.
But I wondered that, as we sort of discussed before, I don't think is the purview of this board. There's another regulatory agency which handles that. But I did want you to just share with the board a little bit about that. That ground floor is not a wide open space. There'll be some amenities in there, and it allows you some flexibility to create seating areas, eating areas, exercise, entertainment, and certainly the kitchen that would be down there. So would you just describe that a little bit like you have done for me?
Sure. If you could zoom in on the lower left a little bit. It has more of the, correct, right there, yeah, which has the office details also. If you look across the front or the lowest part of the building where you have dining, reception, and activity. It is a free-flowing space, but the furniture arrangement in the area basically outlines the usage of the space. You know, we have a reception desk straight across from the front entrance to the facility. And behind that, you know, straight down that short hallway is the elevators up to the floor. But in the main area that we're talking about is activity areas. The other areas are support areas. Over on the right-hand side, it says activity. In essence, that's a living room. Large living room open to reception. And furniture layout will be such that during the day, for example, if we bring in an entertainer in the bottom right-hand corner, that will be generally a somewhat open area where a leader might be there for exercises and things like that. Right by there will be a piano, which will be useful throughout the day as well as part of, because music plays a heavy part of our whole activity program, as well as couches, chairs, and tables, as you would have in a hotel lobby. And then we'll have the reception area, and then the dining area will be such that the kitchen is right off the dining area. We'll have an open kitchen where the people will actually be able to watch the cook the food, watch the chef prepare the food. And the dining will be, you're talking feeding about 30 people a day maximum. And the dining will have obviously enough chairs and tables to accommodate more people than that, but it'll be a dining area. And in the event of a large holiday event, we'll be able to take over the whole space all the way across the bottom of the facility, bottom of the plan, to utilize it so people can congregate throughout the facility. But the living room is going to be comfortable, and the lobby is set up such that it's a lobby so that people can meet, can sit quietly, and in part of the dining area, if a family wants to celebrate an individual's birthday, they'll be able to be in the corner of the dining area. We have enough square footage across there to be able to set up that type of activity for the residents of the facility.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for that clarification. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any more questions from Bill. Our next witness is the architect, but if there are any questions that the board or your professionals have on those follow-ups, now's you're muted, Mr. Chair.
Follow my own rules. I will ask the professionals. I'll start with Ms. Sawant. Do you have any questions? I didn't hear her.
I don't have any questions
Okay.
at this time.
Okay. Is Ms. Shapiro in on this?
Yes.
Yes, I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. And maybe just the fire marshal. You're here, right, Tom?
Mr. Jim, I have no questions.
Okay. How about the board members? Any of the board members have anything right now for Mrs. Angerman? I can't see them on the whole screen because I have the plan in front of me, but I'm assuming not. We can always save it for later. Mr. Clauser, why don't you continue?
Certainly. Thank you, Bill. I think you could mute yourself for the time being, and if Peter, if you could join us. Thank you. I would ask if maybe Mr. Parada is the architect responsible for designing these plans, if he could be sworn, and we'll get his credentials on the record and hopefully get him accepted as a professional.
Sure. Mr. Peretta, if you can please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Peter Peretta, P-O-R-R-E-T-T-A, licensed architect, state of New Jersey, as well as other states.
Thank you. If you could just share with the board a little bit about your professional affiliation, that you've testified in front of other boards before, and just want to give the board a sense of your qualifications.
Okay, I've been practicing architecture for 31 years as a self-employed professional. I'm licensed in several states, all the mid-Atlantic states from Connecticut through Virginia and the state of Florida. I reside in Atlantic County, New Jersey. My office is across the river in Philadelphia.
Mr. Parati, you've testified before planning and zoning boards before, I'm sure.
I have.
Okay, we'll accept his expertise, Mr. Clauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have here, these are the architectural plans that were submitted to the board as part of the application. I don't believe they've been altered in any way for the presentation. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Larry, I don't know if we mark them or we just leave them alone because they're part of it.
We don't have to mark them. It's part of the submission. Mr. Peretta, when you testify, just indicate what sheet you may be referring to in your testimony.
Okay, I could speak from whatever sheet or whatever order you'd like me to. So whatever sheet you have up in whatever order, I think we could finish with the rendering and walk through the functioning of the plans and the other 2D drawings and finish with the color drawing if you'd like.
Sure, I think that's an excellent plan. You want to take us through the floor plans first? Is that what
Sure.
you need to do? Okay.
Okay, you'd have to zoom in if you can. I'm not as young as I used to be. My eyes don't work as well as they did. Okay, as you know, this is a 5-story building with a basement. The first 3 floors is a New Jersey Department of Health licensed facility. So we will have to obtain, we'll have to submit to New Jersey Department of Health and obtain their permission. There's a stair on either end. There's elevators in the middle. One elevator is for the top 2 floors of the independent living, and the other elevator is for the lower 3 floors. Both elevators are planned to do 6 stops, all 5 floors plus the basement. They are located in this way so that if one elevator is down, that all of the building can share the other one, so they're not restricted to the stairs. However, in normal operation, one will be for the state licensed facility and the other one will be for the independent living apartments. The plan follows the program of the operator as well as the New Jersey Department of Health requirements for an assisted living facility. There is requirements for so many square feet per person for activity and or living space, and so many for dining, as well as so many square feet per person for their residents. There's requirements for nursing, examination, as well as staff lounge and the other spaces that you see here. If we can go to the rooms. And you'll notice the building has 2 entrances, one for independent, there's distinctly different, one for independent living and one for the assisted living. So there's no commingling. All the floor plans are the same. There's studio apartments. It's basically a hotel room. There's a bathing area, a kitchen area, and a studio space set up like a bedroom, set up like a hotel room. There will be a desk for the assisted living floors, not the independent living floors, where there'll be a place for someone to be there to monitor the units. They're again, the 2 stairs full height and the 2 elevators full height. And you could see where there's a little vestibule for the independent living elevator. If one elevator is under service, which they do happen to do, you could use the other one. And you'll notice square footage is for the unit, each unit, as well as for the living area. This is a Department of Health requirement. If we can go to the elevations, I'll speak to the elevations. This is the lower level, storage for the facility, storage for the linen, as well as dry goods and possibly refrigerated and frozen goods for the kitchen. Here's the elevations. The building will have on the lower 2 floors a brick veneer, the upper 2 floors a panelized rain screen with at this point 3 different materials selected to bring some variety into the facade. We do have some cantilever canopies at the 2 entrances. You could see the adequate fenestration where there'll be bright daylight in the lower common areas, as well as each living room has a window, and they'll be set up like a hotel room with a mechanical unit under the window. and we have our floor to floor heights. I have consulted with a mechanical engineering firm who specializes in hotels so that we're making every effort to minimize the height of the facility, however, provide adequate ceiling height in all the interior spaces. So we are cognizant of the overall building height and working judiciously to keep it as tight as possible.
That was actually a consideration. You worked with a mechanical engineer in order to get the in between each floor as small as it can be. That was a consideration. You were directed by the applicant to do that. That was something that you considered and you did.
And even the structural system that we're planning minimizes, utilizing a system that minimizes the floor deck height so that we can keep the building as low as possible. So structurally and mechanically, we are working to keep the building as low as possible.
Then you've also created this rendering here, providing some visual aspect of the design of the building to be attractive. And I would imagine that although in your opinion, as you designed it, it's attractive, you'd be welcome to any comments from the board's planner or engineer. I would think that you could work with the styles, the exterior, if they had some input.
Absolutely. Color is the first draft on color, first draft on materials. You know, this will all evolve through the design process, as well as we added articulation and variety to the facade to make it as attractive as we can.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd cover that you want to add?
I can't think of anything.
Okay. You've had I just want to ask one question just to clarify. You've had the opportunity to work with Scott in the design of the building and certainly with the fire department, and we're able to make sure that there's a fire department connection and all of the appropriate safety measures are in place and are part of your design.
Yeah, absolutely. So the lower 3 floors are, as I said, a New Jersey Department of Health licensed facility, healthcare facility, and the upper 3 floors are independent living. And we did work with the engineer's office to locate fire department connections and all of the utilities to the building, generators, because there will be a generator for the assisted living facility. It's a requirement. All of those things we worked through with the civil engineering firm.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions of Mr. Perretta. He's available to your professionals and the board for any questions you may have. Muted again, Mr. Chair. You are muted, Mr. There we go.
People don't want to hear me talk anyway, Peter.
It's the only time I get to tell you something. So
Yes, thank you.
it's fine. Keep muting yourself.
Yeah, well, you caught me on that one twice now. Ms. Sawant, any questions, Mr. Perretta?
No, I have no further questions.
Okay, Ms. Shapiro?
Mr. One quick thing. With the equipments, where would they be located? In the basement?
It depends on the actual equipment. What equipment are you referring to?
The mechanical equipments.
They'll be located on different floors. Some will be on the roof, some will be in the basement.
Okay, okay. All right.
Ms. Shapiro?
I'm just looking at the materials of the building, and I would defer probably to Vina on this. I do see the variation types. I could appreciate the variation types. I'm not sure on the material. I can't really tell from the photos themselves that the windows that stick out the farthest, that gray, what is that material?
It's a panelized rain screen. It could be a variety of things. We're looking at some metal panels, some metal siding, some fiber cement. I mean, the actual material hasn't been decided at this point.
I know Vina or Ms. Sawant has an architectural background, and I would want her to take a close look at the materials to make sure that they are in line with the setting of the neighborhood, and that would be my only comment. Is for the applicant's architect to work with our planner on the material selection to better fit the neighborhood.
Absolutely. So if you could see the facade that's further furthest outboard, that is a clapboard, probably. It could be a fiber cement, probably a metal clapboard, but it is a clapboard. If you could zoom in, you could see it. That's more residential. The one in the back would be a fiber cement panel, and in between the other area could be it's all also panelized, and it's designed as a rain screen, so there'll be water flow behind it, or, rainwater flow behind it, so that it drains out, and it will last longer with less maintenance. I mean, we want to design a maintenance-free facade.
I think, Mr. Perotta, for the next meeting, probably we should have a higher resolution image, because the one that was submitted to my office has the material looks more prominent than on this one, and I'm not able to actually zoom in further. So it'll be helpful if we get a higher resolution image, which I can put up on the screen.
Yeah, we could provide that. It's just the file becomes big and it's hard to email, and that's why we go with a lower res image, but we can provide that.
Mr. Klauser is aware, but we have created a web portal wherein you are able to submit a huge file to the township without having any issues. So please reach out to my office. I can assist you in doing so. And I think to Ms. Shapiro's point, it'll be helpful if you could identify the building material, because I have the elevation, a cleaner version, but I don't have the material. So
Okay,
if
we
you
could
can
do that.
indicate,
Absolutely.
material, that would be great.
Thank you, Ms.
And I'll create the on.
Peter, you're going to say something?
Yeah, am I here? Everyone else seems to be breaking up.
We can hear you.
My comment was, I will create, to Vina, I will create, this application was filed before there was the online filing system. I will create the online system and I'll make it available to Peter so that he can upload a higher res image on it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hart, Fire Marshal, do you have anything for Mr. Peretti?
You mentioned the mechanicals might be on the roof. How much lower is the roof deck from the facade?
There is a small parapet height, mechanicals, bathroom exhaust fans, and that type of units. Every room has a PTAC unit, so that really on the upper floors we're only really conditioning the hallway. I don't anticipate large rooftop units sitting on the roof. I do not anticipate that.
It'll only be a few feet, so there are only going to be a few roof hatches to get up onto the roof?
There'll be probably a roof hatch in each stair. We'll have access to the roof. We're not at that level of design yet, but we will provide access to the roof. Yes.
Well, there's two ways you do that. You do a roof hatch, or you make the stair tower go up another level.
Well, we could do that, but then the stair tower is even higher, and we didn't want to do that because of the concern for height. So our preference is on the upper floors to have a ladder, a wall-mounted ladder, and a hatch to the roof.
Okay.
But we're open to suggest, we're open to any idea. But we did think of that.
Yeah, I was just curious on no air handles. You don't need to be going on the roof then?
I don't know. There may be, but they're not going to be large because, as I said, we're only conditioning the hallways because it's like a hotel. Every room has its own unit under the window. So the condition requirements are a lot lower. The first floor obviously will have units. We haven't selected a system yet.
Yeah, so you're thinking a couple of feet for the parapet drop?
I believe it's shown on the elevation in a section. If you can go to the elevation, you could see it.
Now it's worse than yours.
I don't think you'd have to add them up and subtract. Probably 3 3 feet or 42 inches.
Right.
We have,
All right. Jimmy, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Fire Marshal. Mr. Lavallo, are you here? Do you have anything for the architect? Is Mr. Lavallo on the screen, Ms. Sawant?
He is,
I don't know if
Yes,
he,
I'm here.
if Forrester has anything to.
before Mr. Lavallo chimes in, I just want to add something to Mr. Hart's point and to my question. I just want to ensure that none of the equipments are placed within the yards, because in the past we have had issues where during the construction permit phase, the equipments are placed in the yard and it triggers a new variance, and then the applicant is asked to go back to the board or make arrangements such that you avoid the variance. So we wanted to ensure that that doesn't happen. And then when it's on the roof, the issue is with the height. So I think if at the next hearing, if we can have an elevation that actually shows the roof equipment, if there is any, that would be helpful.
we're not at that level of design to actually get into the locating and selecting equipment. It's rather premature to be doing that. I could show the parapet height. I can certainly increase the parapet height. We have done quite a bit of fall protection work for the Navy and the Philadelphia Navy Yard, so I'm cognizant of fall protection on a roof. So I very happily increase the parapet height. And if you'd like a stair to go up, I can. We've chose not to because of the height of the building. And then you would see 2 stair towers on either end sticking up. So I think raising the parapet to 4 feet or 4.5 feet, especially with the perspective from the sidewalk, you wouldn't see an exhaust fan or a small mechanical unit.
My comment actually was more pertaining to the equipment being in the yard, actually, because we have had issues in the past. So I just wanted to ensure that none of the equipment would be within around the building or within the yard area.
I believe we have space for a generator, which is required, and that would be in the yard. But other than that, I don't anticipate any equipment in the yard.
And do you know the approximate location? I
think
don't
it should be on the
recollect seeing
site
it.
plan.
I don't recollect seeing it, but
Vina, I'm making a note with regard to the equipment. I think we could probably provide some better detail the next time and just sort of clean that up.
sure.
Jimmy,
Peter,
may I
this is
again?
Scott Turner. If you can, Ms. Swan, would you like me to just answer your question about the transformer pad?
Vina, did you hear Mr. Turner? Mr. Turner, you're still under oath as well.
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
I
Mr.
understand that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Turner. Why don't you do that?
Sure. So the site plan does locate a transformer pad, and it is on the northwest corner of the building. It's we're to the right-hand side of the corner of the loading area. So we certainly were cognizant of the fact that there would be a transformer pad on the property. And then we also locate the generator pad on the southerly side of the property adjacent to the Route 18 ramp. But our anticipation, other than those 2 utilities, are that there would be no other utilities required for the building located on the site itself.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Sawant.
Thank you.
Right. Mr. Lavallo,
Jim, can I have one more question, Jim?
you can have 2 more, Tom.
Okay. I really don't want to see a deeper parapet. It makes it very difficult for the men to get off the ladder truck and have to jump off down 44 feet. So the lower the parapet, the better it is for us with our aerial truck, because we won't be able to put it up and over the parapet to get down onto the roof.
Okay,
That
understood.
be worked out?
Bigger than the minimum that you can use. So
I believe the OSHA minimum is 42 inches for fall protection
or a railing.
for a rail. We would have to add a rail if
Right.
we didn't have a 42-inch parapet, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't want you to go any deeper than that.
Okay,
All right?
not a problem.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Fire Marshal. Mr. Lavallo, are you here?
Yes.
You have any questions of the architect, sir?
No, pretty much the last hearing satisfied the concerns in my report, so I'm good.
Okay, I just wanted to check in with you. Thank you very much. Mr. Barata, I have one question. I'm going to ask the rest of the board members if they have any. And I think it would be important. I heard you say something about the two entrances on the ground floor plan. And they're easily distinguishable, one in the rear and one in the front. But I think it's important for those watching at home. And one of the questions was, if you recall, that people were concerned with the independent living residents on the top two floors mixing with, perhaps at that time there was no suggestion of an age restriction, that they might be just mixing in a common area. Could you explain that a little bit better for those watching at home?
If you can go to the floor plan, I could and zero in on the lower level floor plan.
Yeah, maybe you could take the time so people at home would understand this.
Understood. Happy to do so. But please zero in on that ground floor plan, make it large enough so that we can all see it. So on the lower part of the plan is the entry vestibule with the canopy.
Mr. Would you put a cursor on that for those at home? Thank you.
The entry vestibule at the lower end, yes, that is the assisted living entrance. And directly across from that, you'll see a counter. That would be the receptionist for the assisted living with a door to the office. Yes. Now, in the upper part of the plan, you'll see a lobby with a smaller canopy. That is the entrance for the independent living. So the independent living has that entrance. There'll be mailboxes. You could see the mailboxes on the wall and right there, exactly. And then the entrance to the elevator. So you can come in, grab your mail, enter the elevator. Now there is a door between the two that obviously will be locked. If and when the elevator is serviced and it's one of the elevators are serviced and it's down, building management could make the other elevator available. So no one is locked on a floor without access to an elevator. But through the day-to-day operation, that door will be closed and locked, and the independent living will be completely segregated from the assisted living. This is also, DOH looks at this as well, New Jersey Department of Health. Their architect will look at this arrangement as well.
Okay, and sir, just for the commenter's explanation, are you saying that no one could come in the back door if you lived upstairs and just walk into the communal area on the first floor?
Absolutely.
Okay, they cannot, correct?
Absolutely, yes, they cannot. They cannot.
And the only time that they'd be able to access another elevator if the other one was out, correct?
If one of the elevators out and the building management would have to supervise that while an elevator is being serviced, so that no one is stuck on a floor, because there's walkers and wheelchairs in this facility and they need elevator access. Stairs aren't an option for some people. So we are cognizant of that, but the New Jersey Department of Health's architect will be very judicious about this arrangement.
Okay. How does it work for the stairwells?
You'll enter on the floor and every door will be locked so that you can enter the stairwell to egress. However, once in the stairwell, the only door that you can exit is the outside.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Board members, I can't see your faces right now because the plan is up, but if anyone would like to question Mr. Parada, I'd like to do so now, starting from Leon's end of the dais. Mr. Scogno says no. Ms. Kilduff.
I just have one question. The old building, does anyone know how many floors that old building was before the fire?
I don't know if you want me to answer or if you want, I think Vina has the background in her report. I believe it was approved for 3 floors and 3 floors. And Mr. Hart actually made a comment, and I don't know if he wants to make it again or if it was accurate, that there was a very high roof or something that appeared as though it was higher. Tom, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but that was notes that I remember saying.
Yes, no, you're not, Peter. The building before the fire was 3 stories with a big mansard roof, which made it almost 4 stories tall. When the fire happened, it took the roof, the 3rd floor, and left you what you see now is 2 stories flat. but there was almost 2 more stories above it,
Okay,
fire started.
thank you.
Tom, what would that be in 40-foot range?
Yeah, give or take a couple of feet, yes, Jim.
Okay,
The old schoolhouse.
I remember it.
Were not
I
that
went to
big.
school there.
You know, it was not a very tall each level. Stair towers were very short. So I would say you probably fare with 40.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Mr. Connor, anything for you? No, okay. Mr. Walker, I'm sorry, Mr. Dewhurst? No, Mr. Walker? No, okay. What do you have, Mr. Stoner?
No.
No, okay. And finally, Mr. Psychowski?
No.
Okay, Mr. Clauser, back in your ball court there.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Excellent job. I very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
Frank is up. Frank Miskovich, I think he's testified before this board before, but if I could have him sworn and have him qualified as our traffic engineer.
Yeah, Mr. Miskovich, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the
It's-
record.
It's Frank Miskovich. It's spelled M-I-S-K-O-V as in Victor, I-C-H. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, practicing traffic and highway engineering.
Mr. Miskovich is well known to this board, except he has his beard. I shaved mine today and he did not. So if those on the panel don't recognize him, it is Mr. Miskovich. We accept his expertise.
Next time I will have it shaved.
Frank, if you could, you've done a great deal of work on this site, and I know that it's included a great deal of research and design work with Scott, and also you've had the opportunity to review Ms. Drum's memos and respond to them. So if you and certainly Vina and Nicole's memos as well, if you could take us through a little bit of the history of it and your analysis.
That's fine. And since I think that the public is interested in this too, I'm going to take a little bit more time to explain the various steps that we've taken in our analysis. But I want to point out for the record first that there's 3 documents that we have submitted. The first document was our traffic and parking assessment that was dated November 1st of 2019. The second document we submitted was my March 12, 2020 letter that was in response to Ms. Drum's memorandum. And I believe that was the March 10th review letter from her. Concerning that memorandum was the fact that for the independent living, I considered the apartment use to be a mid-rise multifamily use. And Ms. Drum, and I think she's right, suggests that we use a low-rise category, which is more like a garden apartment. And that actually has a little bit more traffic generation. So in my March 12th response to her, we did that analysis with the low-rise classification and the higher trip generation. And obviously has an impact on parking also. The third document that we submitted was in response to your board planners and engineer staff memorandum on March 13th. There was a comment 4C on page 8 of that memorandum that asked about what the potential impact would be, especially on parking, if 1/2 of the units in the assisted living portion had 2 bedrooms or 2 beds in the studio apartment. So it would increase from the 24 beds that are proposed to a potential 34 beds. We went through that analysis and I addressed that in a letter dated May 12th that was addressed to Chairman Sullivan and the board members. In my presentation, I think I will go through my report and findings and addressing these impacts and try to summarize these 3 documents that I submitted. Rather than going through each one individually, we try to summarize everything that was done. And as I go through this, as you've heard this evening, the independent living will be age restricted. So that has a lower trip generation and a lower parking requirement based on IT standards when you compare that to the low-rise classification that we use. So I'm going to kind of give you the worst case that we did in the analysis, but keep in mind that the age restricted does have lower requirements and lower activity levels. The scope of work that we did was we've done a site inspection. We conducted traffic counts on Old Mattawan Road. We estimated traffic generation, projected traffic out to a year in the future that we thought this building might be constructed and occupied. We did a capacity analysis, the site access onto Old Mattawan Road. And we did a complete parking supply and demand evaluation. Concern being that we wanted to make sure that we had adequate parking to support this facility, especially when you look at the site that we're bounded on 3 sides by streets, with basically no ability for off-street parking. So we want to ensure that we have adequate parking on the site to support this facility. The traffic counts we did were in September 2019, and we conducted that for a full 1-week period, weekdays and a weekend. And we counted 24 hours a day at 15-minute intervals. And we found that the peak hours, the weekday morning and evening peak hour and Saturday peak hour, were fairly consistent, ranging from about 630 vehicles two-way on a Saturday to 693 in the weekday PM peak period. That's fairly consistent every day of the week. Sunday peaks were much less than that, about 516 was the average. So the Sunday traffic is about 70% of our weekday averages. So it was fairly consistent throughout the day. We were comfortable with the traffic numbers that we reported. In determining what the impacts might be, we projected traffic out 4 years to the year 2023, using factors that have been developed by the Department of Transportation for growth rates and average background growth on roadways. We used the 1% rate compounded annually to project traffic. And the trip generation, we used the ITE's trip generation manual, the 10th edition. And as I said, we did that for the assisted living facility and for a multifamily housing rather than assisted living. And we're looking at peak hour trips ranging from about 18 in the morning to 27 on a Saturday peak. So that was the range, about 1 every 2 minutes. If I looked at the Ms. Drum's review letter about the low rise category, that only added 2 to 4 peak hour trips, which is not significant from a traffic engineering perspective. But I will go through that analysis. What we found is that our site driveway, a left turn in, will operate levels of service A, very good levels of service, very little delay. And the exiting movement is a level of service B, but it's just over the threshold from A to B. If I consider assisted living in place of a low rise in the regular living, I'm sure I would be into the A category, but it would be no worse than the level of service B that we're looking at. And I think it was important, since we're looking at a use variance for this particular application, I thought it appropriate that we compared some of the trip generation of the former medical office use that was approved by the board on this site and some of the permitted uses in the EDO-1 zone, just to provide the board and the public with a comparison of traffic generation. That building, when it was approved for medical office, was approximately 15,000 square feet in the 3 stories. If I look at trip generation for that, would be about double in the peak hour of what we've estimated for this facility, ranging from about 42 to 52 peak hour trips when we're in the 18 to 27 range. But I think what's more important is the fact that the parking requirement for that medical office is 100 spaces based on town ordinance. There's only about 56 that's available on the site. So just as a professional, as the medical office, I'm sorry, the parking would be a particular problem, more than double of what we're providing. And when I look at comparable uses or uses that are permitted in the zone, I find that some of the uses that are permitted are comparable. There's a few that are less, and there's several that are more traffic generation. As an example, retail sales, health and fitness center, business office, and even like an 8,000 square foot medical office building would have trips comparable to what we're proposing. And when I did these calculations, I considered the area or the footprint of the building that is within the building setback. I don't know if you can see the cursor. I took that square foot, which was about 5,000 square feet, 2 floors would give me 10,000. And I took the 56 parking space and multiply that times what the township parking requirement. So I maxed out parking to determine what the building sizes were. But going as that, adding on a restaurant, 2,800 square foot restaurant would be about the same amount of traffic generation. Mini warehouse could be there, but that would be obviously substantially less. But I think on the other side of the spectrum, I can look at a 5,000 square foot bank that would have about double or 3 times the amount of traffic. Daycare facilities would have about double that traffic. You could also have a fast food restaurant in there without a drive-through, or a coffee donut shop, which would have substantially more traffic than we're projecting. So the proposed use, when I look at it from a traffic generation perspective, is consistent with a number of the uses in that zone. It's not inconsistent. Parking, as I indicated before, was a major concern. Mr. Turner at the last hearing described what the township requirements were for parking and what the residential site improvement standards are regarding parking. The township standard is 1.75 spaces per unit for the multifamily, and the assisted living is calculated at 1 space for 4 beds plus 1 space for employee. We've calculated that to be 58 spaces that are required. We have 56, so based on the town standard, we're requesting a 2-space variance. Residential site improvement standards, however, have a parking requirement of 1.8 for the independent living facility, which is similar to the towns, except that includes a parking requirement for visitors, about half the space per unit. So although it's consistent, it does consider visitor parking in there. And the requirement for the assisted living is different than the towns. It's like 1 space for every 2 units. So on the RSIS side of that equation, we need 56 spaces. We have 56. We don't need a waiver from that. So the question I'm looking at in here and whether to support those 2-space variants from the township standard, I looked at the parking demand. Parking demand is used the Institute of Transportation Engineers and their recent publication, the 5th edition of the Parking Generation Manual. So I looked at the various variables that they go into looking for these parking requirements. For an example, the assisted living, they have variables of parking rates for square footage of the facility, number of beds, number of occupied beds, number of dwelling units, number of occupied dwelling units, different variables. The multifamily has something similar where we look at the number of dwelling units, number of occupied dwelling units, number of bedrooms, etc. And they do have an average rate and what they call a 85th percentile rate, which is a much higher parking rate or demand-based number. What I did for the parking to be conserved, I looked at all those variables and I took the highest parking demand of any of those. In other words, if the number of occupied spaces had the higher parking demand compared to bedrooms, I used the higher number. In going through that, I found that we would have peak demand on the assisted living at 32 spaces on a weekday, and it would be a little bit lower on Sunday and Saturday. For the residential peak would have 36 spaces peak demand weekday, 39 on a Saturday and a Sunday. But we've been looking at the supply side, and that's the demand side. I think what's important in this facility, it's mixed use. The township requirements, the RSIS requirement is supply oriented. It doesn't look at variations, time of day of the week, etc. For an example, the assisted living is going to have peak times during the weekday hours, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., that type of time period, where the residential has peaks later in the evenings, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning, which is standard. So the peaks are not occurring at the same time. I went back through and did a shared parking analysis following procedures that are outlined by the Institute of Transportation Engineers and the Urban Land Institute, where I looked at these variations. And I looked at peak demand throughout the course of the day. And what I found going through this is that applying these factors, using the IT peak demand, that the spaces are approximately 80% occupied at peak times, and that's the 11 a.m. period to about 6 p.m. weekday. That's the maximum. Saturday, I'm down to about 70% max occupied. Sunday, about 76% occupied. So we have enough parking when I look at these peak periods and the operation of two facilities. But I went one step further. I took the RSIS standard and I took the township standard and I said, okay, I use that as the peak demand. And I went through the same analysis. What I still find out is that I'm looking at parking demands of less than 80% occupied spaces during that peak period, midday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Having gone through that, I feel that we had enough parking provided to support this particular use. And if you consider that the independent living will now be age restricted, that will have a lesser parking demand based on ITE, has a lower trip generation demand based on ITE. I will point out that it doesn't change the RSIS requirement because they don't have a requirement for age restricted in their formulas. So we're still using the garden apartment parking requirement, which is for one bedroom. They don't have one for a studio, so we're still a little bit higher. But I believe we have more than enough parking to support this particular use. In my response to comment 4C of your staff report, we looked at what would happen going from 24 to 34 beds in the assisted living. And I went through the same procedures that I did in looking at parking demands for shared parking throughout the course of the day. And I found that I would still be less than 81% occupied spaces during the week. In other words, we probably about 45, 46 spaces occupied, we have 56. And the township requirements only increased by 3 spaces from 16 to 19 for the assisted living. So we require 63 spaces by the town ordinance under that scenario for a variance of 7 spaces. In RSIS, we would be a variance of a waiver of 5 spaces. So even though we don't anticipate that happening, we looked at what would go with 34 beds. And it's on the conservative side because RSIS doesn't consider beds. They look at bedrooms. So we consider 2 beds in the one room as 2 bedrooms. We were a little bit, I think, conservative on those numbers in the estimates. If going through the site plan, Mr. Turner at the last hearing went through issues and talked about the site circulation and parking. We're asking for a design waiver of the 9x18 stalls where 10x20 is required. In this particular instance, we have a low turnover facility. That's more longer term parking. We don't have shopping carts. We don't have loading, unloading of large boxes like you might find at a store. And the 9x18 is a standard width that is in the industry. So for this particular facility, I think the 9x18 is adequate. And also, if you consider the length, we have 32 perimeter parking spaces, not adjacent to the building, but around the outside perimeter. It's a grass area. So if you consider there's a 2-foot overhang, in effect, we essentially meet the 20-foot depth on those spaces. The loading area is located on School Street, as Mr. Turner pointed out. That was a concern for us, is like to make sure that that was a proper location. We wanted to maximize the number of parking spaces on site. And quite frankly, we front on 3 streets, so that became a particular issue for us. We looked at what would happen on School Street. Well, when you look at that, we determined that although it's preferable to be on site, it's not unusual to have parking on a street, especially in older areas or built up areas. But having said that, the anticipated number of truck deliveries, as Mr. Zengli pointed out, are very low. You're talking about 1 to 2 trucks a week that might use that facility. The majority of deliveries are by the smaller box trucks. You're going to get FedEx and UPS type deliveries, but they're not going to use the loading area. They're going to pull up to the front entrance in the parking lot, run in and right out. It's a very fast turnover type operation. But as Mr. Turner pointed out, the site can accommodate a single unit truck up to a 40-footer. It can handle a WB-40 tractor trailer, which we don't anticipate any happening, but the site can accommodate that as well as your township fire truck. The loading zone, as we proposed, really doesn't have any impact. The School Street is a dead-end street. It's only the one business at the end that's on that street. So there's really no impact from a traffic standard or traffic operation viewpoint with having the loading area there. But also, even though we're taking some of the right-of-way for that loading area, I think what's important here is that the edge of the loading zone is in line with that edge of pavement on School Street. We don't encroach into the travel way. So if the travel weight is 22 or 24 feet today, it will remain with that loading area. So we're not impeding the traffic flow on School Street with the loading zone. And as is indicated, Ms. Shapiro requested it, and I believe Mr. Turner confirmed that the applicant will mill and overlay School Street the entire width, and we will place all new curbing on our side of School Street. In the interim, since I don't know if it was the last meeting, but we did receive comments from Middlesex County. There was a May 11th email to Dawn Borberly, which basically was a conditional approval by the county, subject to their standard requirements. What does that mean? It means that there will be a dedication of some right-of-way, either in the form of an outright dedication or an easement, based upon their county's master plan for a road widening. We will be installing new curb along the entire frontage and a 5-foot sidewalk along our frontage on Old Matawan Road that will be ADA compatible with handicap ramps. Those are the primary conditions. There's others that will affect, obviously some of the drainage calculations, replacing inlets, etc. But there will be side improvements made or requested by the county. And I think that was a comment or a question raised by either the board or the professionals at the last hearing. So basically, if I quickly summarize this, is that the trip generation that we're estimating is consistent with a number of the land uses that are within the zone. The side driveway that we have onto Old Matawan Road is going to operate satisfactorily with the traffic generation and future traffic volumes. I believe the 56 spaces that we're proposing are adequate to support this use, and obviously the 2-space variance from the township requirement is supported by the calculations. And I think what's really important is to consider that the 2 uses peak at different times, that we have adequate parking to support both of these uses. And I believe that would summarize it. I mean, I can go particular point by point through the review letters if the board desires, or respond to questions from the board or the public or the professionals.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. I don't have any questions for Frank. His analysis was thorough and responsive. Mr. Chairman, he's available to your professionals and board for any questions they may have.
Thank you, Mr. Clauser. Let's go to Mr. first.
Thank you, Chairman. Hey, I want to apologize. My electricity came back on, and between the electricity coming back on and generating going off, I lost my internet for a few minutes. So my apologies. But I did hear most of Mr. Miskovich's testimony. The one thing I guess we're going to need some clarity on is I believe Mr. Miskovich made a comment that the RSIS requirement, I believe, was 56 and the township was 58. However, in his latest correspondence, he notes that it's 63 for the township and 61 for RSIS. So I think just between, again, I think I brought this up last meeting with Mr. Turner, is I think we just need to come to a resolution of what is that requirement number and for the parking variance. In regards to parking, I did review Mr. Miskovich's information. And yes, there is different variables you can look at in regards to, dwelling units or beds or anything like that. And generally speaking, most of the information that he provided is you're looking about an average of about 46 parking spaces during the peak demand. I would generally agree with Mr. Miskovich about the senior restriction generally does have a lower trip generation and lower parking number than, I'm going to say, generally non-age restricted. I just think between now and the next meeting that maybe we could nail down that number if the board feels it's more comfortable on your end. In regards to traffic generation, yeah, I agree generally with Mr. Miskovich regarding how much traffic this is going to generate, and as well as looking at other your permitted uses, because this is a use variance. Since as a use variance from a traffic perspective, it was Mr. Miskovich, as he said, he has to take a look at the permitted uses, how much traffic will be generally generated. And again, you have a very range of uses that could go on this site regards to mini warehousing and health and fitness centers, which, could be a little bit on the lower end, but then you also have uses that are on the higher end, which are, retail sales or like a daycare center. So again, there is a wide range of, traffic that could be generated. And at the end of the day, this is a county roadway, and Middlesex County will have jurisdiction regarding the access design and location. And that's, I think, the only clarity I think we really need to do is regards to the parking requirement and the parking variance. Any other questions? More than happy to answer that for you.
Mr. Miskovich, you want to comment on?
Yes, thanks, Ms. Drum. Just a clarification. We have 24 beds in assisted living. That requires a 2-space variance from the town standard to comply with RSIS. In Ms. Shapiro and Ms. Salon's memorandum, they mentioned what happens if one half of the units were at 2 beds in each unit. So that was the latest correspondence to May 12th. I said, okay, we have 34 beds now. And what would that requirement be? And that's where we mentioned the 7-space variance from the town standard and the 5-space waiver or variance from RSIS. So I guess the question is it 24 or 34 beds? And that's something I think we'd have to discuss with the applicant, but that was just a calculation and to address what that impact would be.
Understood.
Thank you. Ms. Shapiro, do you have anything for Mr. Miskovich?
No, I always defer to Ms. Drum on this, but I'm happy to hear that it was reiterated that School Street would be paved full width. And I'm happy to hear that the county had commented and are requiring a 5-foot sidewalk along Old Manawan Road, along with reconstruction of the curbing. I believe I did comment last meeting, but just so that the applicant is aware that if the board looks favorably on this application, the paving of School Street would be then subtracted from the transportation pro rata fee that would get calculated later on. So I just want to put that on the record. That's it for me.
Well, one of the things that came up, and I'm going to go a little out of turn before I go to Ms. Sawant. I'm going to interject something, Mr. Miskovich and Ms. Shapiro and Ms. Drum. One of the things that was brought up by the public was that there's going to be a widening of Route 18, and it's going to interfere with this project. You're all professionals. Do you know anything about that, Ms. Drum?
I do not. And and I'm going to presume that even if DOT was going to be widening Route 18, it's probably a long lead project. And, there would eventually have to be an appraisal at DOT's end regards to right of way and taking and things like that. At this point, because there's not a project, at least on the books that I'm aware of, and it's not in design or even in construction, I don't think it's something that the township can actually, consider that as part of this application.
I just want you to weigh in for the public's information, and I appreciate that. Ms. Shapiro?
Yeah, so there is a pavement rehabilitation project from Ruse Lane in East Brunswick all the way down to Texas Road in Marlboro. That pavement rehabilitation project is actually, I'm pretty certain that they're getting close to the end. Residents might have noticed, trees coming down in the median area, some slight improvements within the signalized intersections, some ADA handicap ramps at the intersections that were being upgraded, some signals, especially pedestrian signal heads that were updated within that corridor. There actually is a change of plan that recently has happened where they're putting overhead signs when you're traveling on Route 18 southbound from the East Brunswick area as you enter they're going to be overhead cantilever signs so that the traveling public that are entering Old Bridge don't get confused as they're entering and they see the direct lanes for County Route 516, the exit lane for 527, and then the direct straight through travel lanes that get you on 18 south of that location or that interchange. It was quite extensive as far as the pavement rehabilitation on there. When they came in multiple times for updates to the public officials within Old Bridge Township and the other communities, we actually had a meeting as a whole. There was no talks of any further plans for Route 18. So I was surprised to hear that would go on. Usually if a project isn't a DOT project and there is multiple stages. We're talking about conceptual design, preliminary engineering, final engineering, then the bidding process, during that time frame, which probably takes somewhere between, on the best day, 5 years, on the worst, probably about 10 years, depending on how big the project is. In each one of those stages, local officials are notified. So if there's something going on, even in the earliest stages, Old Bridge Township would be aware of that. So, I mean, if the public is on this call or on this Zoom meeting and they do have further information, I'd love to know about it so I could further investigate. But to my knowledge, there is no other DOT job that would affect this. For the next meeting, what I could do is, for this particular area, I have the complete construction plans for that pavement rehabilitation project. I could then take the plan that would show this piece of property to sort of alleviate some of the concerns for the public so that they know that the details in this area. From what I remember when I looked at it last time, I believe it was guide rail in this area, maybe, replacement in kind, but nothing to the extent of what I heard last meeting.
And nothing that would affect this lot, I wouldn't.
No.
And as such, this is a county road that it fronts on. And I would think the county would be well aware of future projects with the state as well, correct?
Yes, as they were invited, they're always invited with us on those local official meetings. Just so you know, I looked in detail on that DOT plan that I have because I wanted to, when I was reviewing the drainage on this project, I wanted to make sure that when I looked at the capacity analysis that Mr. Turner had submitted to us, and I was looking at the direction of flow, that, we weren't, compromising anything that's DOT's property. So I remember the plan in my head in great detail, but I could certainly put that up as an exhibit to alleviate some of the residents' concern at the next meeting.
Thanks. I want to put them at ease that there's not misinformation. If there is in fact something, they should know, and if there isn't, there's no need to. And Mr. Miskovich, also as a traffic engineer, could I put you on the spot? Do you know of anything?
Well, this came up over a year and a half ago, I believe, when we were looking at the site. I did meet the county. I did try to find that information, DOT. And the only thing that's going, as Ms. Shapiro talked about, is really safety and kind of infrastructure improvements. The Federal Highway Administration is requiring that all traffic signals be brought up to ADA standards, which is push buttons, signals, handicap ramps, etc. So that's part of this project. There's a rehabilitation going on. I don't know if it's a shoulder widening, but they're not adding lanes, that's for sure. And safety improvements going in as far as guide rails. But that's basically the extent of the project that DOT is doing. I would also point out, and looking at this, what fronts our property is a ramp. It goes from 516 on 18. And that's pretty high speed ramp. I don't believe that would be changed much from its current design. It doesn't give any other benefit because you're coming into a bridge structure. So your tapering and transitions would be impacted. So I don't, and I agree that if anything were to be done as such a long-range plan, that it wouldn't affect this project. It definitely would not affect any parking as I see it, because we do have a green area adjacent to the right-of-way.
All right, thank you, Mr. Miskovich. And I'm sorry, I apologize, Ms. Sawant, that I stepped in, but I didn't want to forget that for the public's sake. Please go ahead if you have anything for Mr. Miskovich.
Sure. I agree with Ms. Drum on the comments she made about parking. In fact, for the next meeting, actually, I would like to revisit our own planning and engineering memo, because now maybe with the change in use from independent living to an age-restricted housing, there might be comments which are not relevant, or there are additional comments that we have with changed in use. So I would like to revisit our section. The use has changed. Some of the comments need to be revised for sure.
Okay, thank you. Fire Marshal Hart, I know you had a concern about School Street that you brought up at the last time. Do you have any other questions? Is Mr. Miskovich satisfied turning radius and all for trucks?
Yeah, that's for the call, not the handle the street.
We can't hear you, Tom.
No comments, Jim.
Oh, you have nothing. Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Klauser. Or Mr. Sachs, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just
Then I'll
one
go to the
comment.
board.
Now that, yeah, one comment regarding the possibility of widening Route 18. As you know, I also represent the Township of East Brunswick. I know that this property is very close to the East Brunswick border. I am not aware of any plans to widen the northbound side of Route 18 going into East Brunswick, where that bridge starts, which would actually then be in East Brunswick. So I think I would agree with Mr. Miskovich. I don't think there's any short-term plan to widen Route 18 at this particular location.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. I'm going to go to the board. I'm going to start as if we were sitting on the panel. Mr. Scogno? None. Ms. Kilduff? Nothing. Mr. Connor? Nothing. Mr. Dewhurst? Nothing. Mr. Walker? Nothing. Mr. Stoner? Nothing? Okay. And finally, Mr. Sakowski? No? Okay. Back to you, Mr. Klauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we kind of all decided that this might be a good place to stop in the presentation of the testimony.
Okay.
There's another application that's on your agenda, Mr. Chair, and I spoke with my client for this application. It was agreeable that this would be a place to stop and allow the public to participate in this, with the hopes that maybe we could do Old Bridge Rifle tonight as well.
Okay. As I stated earlier, this would be the time, if you have any interest, this is going to become the public portion for matter 37-19Z, Vision Old Bridge 3 LLC. If you're interested in commenting or questioning anything you've heard this evening, I would ask you to dial one of the numbers that you see on the screen if you're watching on YouTube or on cable TV. It might take a little bit of time, so I'll talk over it. But I would just ask the public to please be concise. We'll try and listen to everyone, but obviously there is limited time, and I don't want to turn anybody away, but let's not repeat things that were already said. If there's new information that you would like to question, please do so. If you're making the same comments you made last time, please do not. It's just kind of laborious, and we have other issues to speak for tonight. So I'll be quiet now, and Ms. Sawant will take over when she sees any numbers.
First caller, Erica.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay, you just state your name, and then the board attorney is going to swear you in.
Sure. Erica Pizzano Caragnola.
All right, ma'am, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, please state your name, spelling your last name and address for the record.
Erica Pizzano, Pisano, Caragnola, Cottignola. And I don't want to state my exact address. I live on Old Madawan Road. I live on
That's
this
fine.
road where this
That's
property
fine. That's fine. Okay.
Okay, good evening. I'm a homeowner on this block, unfortunately, right across from this property. For 5 years, I had to stare at this eyesore. The police were called many times to come here due to people, trying to go in there, do drugs in there. And as much as I would love to see, an establishment there that is not an eyesore, I would have to say that 5 stories is a little ridiculous. It's huge. And on a residential block like this, it's not fitting in, first of all. And I don't think that it would be a good idea because the traffic, number one, I know you guys have put the traffic thing here, you have seen, for the numbers, but I live here and I don't drive. So I'm here all the time with 3 of my children. And it is a very dangerous block. My children never, ever go in front of my house. They are only allowed in the backyard. People do at least 50 over here. I have a sign in front of my house for 15 miles an hour, which is never followed. 2 out of my 3 children take a bus right in front of where, this establishment will be, as do many children from this block. They walk in there and they wait for the bus inside of there. I just don't think that it would be safe. Right now, the school is closed, the Miller School, which is on the corner, right by 516. But there's traffic still, even with the school closed. So I can't imagine what it's going to be like with that many dwelling units across the street and parking spaces and people in and out of there living on this block when there's already crazy traffic and reckless traffic, to be exact. I just want to keep my children safe. And it's dangerous enough because we have no sidewalks over here. And I walk over here all the time and it's dangerous as it is. So I can't imagine how much more dangerous it will be with more traffic going on, amplifying this. I mean, I really can't imagine. I am not opposed to something being built there. And I'm not opposed to what is proposed to be built there. I'm not opposed to that. I'm opposed to 5 stories. I think that is a tremendous amount compared to what I'm staring at now. Thank
Anything
you.
else you want to say to the board, ma'am?
That's it.
Well, we thank you for taking your time out and your interest in this, and obviously we've made record of that. And of course, it's part of the permanent record by you just speaking to us right now, voicing your opinion. So the board takes note of what your comments. Thank you very much. Ms. Sawant?
Next caller, Nina Jokonowitz. The following caller will be number ending in 0022.
Ms. Jokonowitz, I believe you testified at the last hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, Ms. Jokonowitz, I believe you testified at the last hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I
Okay.
did.
You're still under oath.
Great, that's fabulous. 2 things. One is I didn't get the receipt back from the office, so I wanted to confirm whether or not, I think Kim, I don't see her
never
name.
got your letter.
Okay, so Kim, I'm gonna send a second batch to you.
I don't need a second batch. I just need 1 letter.
Well, I know, but since you didn't get the first one, I'm gonna send you a second route, because if you haven't gotten it, this post office has been a little bit confusing post COVID crisis. But I do have a number of questions. There were 2 statements I noticed, and it's kind of confusing to me. The Fire Marshal Hart said that this building was once 4 stories, and all of us all the concerned citizens were told it was only 2, maybe 3 stories. And Mr. Moskowitz, the engineer, the road engineer, I don't know, Mr. Moskowitz, that's your name, sir?
He's a traffic engineer, ma'am.
Traffic engineer. Thank you very much, sir. He stated it was only 3 stories. So which one was it? 4 stories or 50 feet or 3 stories and 30 feet?
I'll refresh your memory because I know that a lot of things have been said. What Mr. Hart said was it was a 3-story building with a roof that appeared to make it 4. So my question to him was, how high did it look? And I said, well, did it look at 40 foot? And he said, that would be about right. But no, it was a 3-story, and he was referring to the roof that made it look bigger. And I believe Mr. Miskovich has stated that it was a professional, a medical arts building with.
Yeah,
3
from what I
floors.
remember, it was only 2 stories with a little bit of an extra roof for escaping during a fire. Is that, but that was
It was
what
3.
I remember.
Just so you
I
know,
can do
it
it
was
after
3,
the
ma'am.
meeting is over.
So go ahead, it was 3 stories, go ahead.
Okay, so earlier, so I'm gonna kind of jump around. I apologize to everybody.
Okay,
Because
we
we're-
do want you to be expeditious. I can't let you
Okay,
talk
I'm
for 22
trying to
minutes
be.
like
Okay,
last time.
so Mr. Zengerle said that there was only there are 4 nursing facilities, and the one Reformed Church is a site that has one in town, and 27 nursing facilities in the county, 42 beds versus 156 or something like that. I don't remember exactly the number. I looked at the square footage of the apartments, the studio apartments, and they seem rather small in comparison to the designs that were done by Peter Parecki for other sites, including his assisted living Premier, Cadbury assisted living, which was about 285 square foot for a studio space.
Okay, if you're going to testify, ma'am, are you going to testify or are you going to ask a question?
So I'm trying to understand what it is that is really necessary. And the other thing is that what I'm very concerned about is every single one of the people testifying tonight spoke about a hotel. So what are you going to be doing as a zoning board to make sure that when they do not get the occupancy they want, that and by the way, all the apartments I saw that are $5,000 to $6,000 each a month. I don't know any person in their right mind would pay $10,000 a month, one on the ground floor and one upstairs to live in.
Chairman, that's not part of the rental amounts are not part of the record, and that's complete fabrication.
No one said.
Say that they're
hotel, ma'am.
$10,000
What they said was they were, what the.
I looked at the
architect-
fountain, the designs that were done by your engineer, Peter. The fountain is $5,600 at a base price, by the way.
We're talking about this application.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I would like to know, I was looking at the design and like, I'm sorry, Avina said that it's a very low grade and the sizes of the doors are not obvious.
Is there a question, ma'am? Is there
Yes,
a
what is
question?
it, how are tenants going to go between, when there is an elevator issue, between the front and the back? Because it looks like, to me, it's not designed for wheelchairs. That's first.
You
And
brought this up
second-
last time, ma'am.
And second, and you know, I know that this is really irritating for us public, non-educated in engineering design to ask all these questions. So I apologize in profusely for my inability to be as perfect as the people testifying. But I'm trying to understand what the width of those doors are. Peter, I think you're the designer, right?
You're talking about the architect?
The architect, designer. Yes, sorry. Designer, architect.
What is it that you want to know, ma'am?
The width of those doors, are they going to be able to access what size wheelchair? And
I'm sure all that's ADA requirements, ma'am, that they have to
no,
provide.
actually, the question, because he said that there's going to be a front and a back door. The front door is going to be for the residents on the 3rd and 4th floor, or the 4th and 5th floor, and the front hallway is going to be for the 1st and 2nd floor. I don't know if there's an ADA requirement for that. That's
I can assure you that there is, ma'am.
Okay, and then last week, 2 weeks ago, Mr. Zingerle said that there were that you're looking at memory assisted patients, and what I'm concerned about is 2 things. First of all, what is going to be the format of this organization to move people out of this facility when they become too memory impaired? Because
Now you're talking about regulatory stuff that you did last time, and that has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with the purview of this board, ma'am.
Okay, it's nothing to do with the purview of the board. Okay, so
Not regulatory issues, no.
okay, I don't know if that's a regulatory issue. I don't know. I mean, he
Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, ma'am, Ms. Jochowitz, it's a regulatory issue.
Okay.
This board, let me finish. This board deals with land use issues, okay?
Okay, so this is a land use issue.
Let me, ma'am, you keep cutting me off, so you want an
apologize.
answer, okay? You gotta let me finish. All right, so this board deals with land use issues. We are We are bound by a particular state statute to only deal with land use issues, and those issues are very specific. Anything dealing with operations of this facility are governed by the state of New Jersey regulatory agencies. That would be the Department of Health. That might be the Department of Community Affairs.
Okay,
That's not the
thank
purview
you.
of this board.
I understand, Mr. Sachs. Thank you. Okay,
Yep.
so then I do have a question. First of all, you're going to have a bunch of occupants that are over the age of 50. So there are more occupants that are going to be with handicap plates and whatnot. And I know the width of the parking spaces are narrower by at least a foot.
No, that's incorrect. We're talking about the non-handicap stalls. The
Yeah, the
normal park-
non-handicap stalls. That's correct.
No,
I'm talking
no,
about
no,
those.
no. Again, we're talking apples and oranges. They're asking for a waiver of the standard parking stall size. All right, they're not asking.
Yes.
Again, let me finish, okay? I know you want to say what you want to say, but when you ask a question and you ask me to give an answer, I've got to be able to respond. All right, so the standard width, they're asking for a waiver on the standard parking stall size, which is 10 by 20. They want to go 9 by 18. That's a fairly common request, particularly in a setting where it's not a retail shopping center. The handicap stalls have to be a certain size, and that's not being deviated.
Of course, I get that. I get the handicap stalls have to be, but with the requirement that you guys all signed off on or agreed to, that this would be for 55 and older
We didn't
community.
agree.
Nobody
Nothing's been
agreed on
agreed to.
anything, ma'am.
Excuse me. Nothing's been agreed to. That's an offer by the applicant. So nothing's been
Okay, I'm
agreed to by
sorry
this board.
for misstating. I apologize. Thank you for correcting me. But in the event that it is part of the agreement in this zoning design to have a 55 and older and everything else, you're perhaps going to need additional handicap parking?
No,
No?
the parking, no, not at all. The parking calculations and the number of handicap stalls are based on the residential site improvement standards and upon our parking ordinances. So no, we do not need additional handicap parking.
You don't need additional handicap parking?
Not
So-
required.
Okay, so there was another thing. I was looking at the design of this and the fire emergency layout, and I know that you guys all are professionals in this, but could you pull up the structure of the building and let's go through it with me? Can
Let's
somebody
have
do
a
that?
question first, ma'am. Let's
Yeah,
see
the
what you
question
wanna talk
is
about.
I'd like somebody to physically go through and explain to me how you're gonna move 24 residents out of the facility.
You asked that question last time. It's a regulatory
Yes,
issue.
and now you can bring up the picture because the architect's here. You asked
We're not
me
going to do that, ma'am. I'm going to cut you off because you're just rambling on, ma'am.
I'm asking the question.
You're not asking the question.
The question is, can you explain it to me? You told me to wait for the architect to come.
Yes?
And now the engineer is in attendance. So
What do you want to ask? Ask the question.
I'd like him to explain to me how they're going to move 24 people out, and those are the handicapped people, down an elevator, memory assisted people down an elevator in wheelchairs out. I'd like him to
Again, that's an
explain.
operational question and regulatory in nature, not the board, not the purview of the board.
Okay, let me ask you a question. In the event this board decides for some reason that everything about this design is absolutely superb and perfect for the location, are you going to do anything as a board to make sure that it doesn't become a hotel design, since it appears to be that every single person in the last three people that
I don't even know how to answer that. Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. First of all, that's not what the applicant has proposed here. If in fact this application is approved by the board, then there will be conditions as to what type of occupants can be here. I will also tell you that one of the conditions we generally have, and I'm going to ask Mr. Clauser tonight, that I would like to see some type of form of rental agreement, that would be signed by residents of this building, because that will provide some assurance to the municipality that it's not a hotel, that it's not a boarding house, that it's more of a long-term care and a long-term rental facility.
We would certainly provide that, Larry.
Thank you, Mr. Clauser.
And I can always record the the resolution, deed restriction on the property for the use. But I think we all know that the use that we're getting approved is all we're allowed to do there.
Yes.
You haven't gotten it approved yet.
He said,
Sir.
it's not what he said.
He said, we're going to get approved, is actually his words, exactly.
Well, unless he's got some foresight, which I don't think he has, and he's appeared in front of us a number of times when he's had applications before where maybe he thought he was going to get an approval and he didn't. You know, obviously the board has to hear all of the testimony, has to make a decision based upon land use principles that govern this state, and certainly to consider the comments from members of the public, Ms. Joknowitz.
Okay, and then there was one last thing, now I appear to have misstated the Route 18 construction, and I thank you for correcting me on that. But there is a road widening that's being designed that you spoke of on Old Matawan Road, and how will that affect the frontage of that property and all the properties adjacent? I mean, you're gonna have a 5-foot walkway, so is the engineer still on, Peter Parecki, or?
It'll be Mr. Miskovich, I guess, who might be able to answer.
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure I understand the question. The county, as far as I know, has no plans for any improvements of Old Matawan Road or widening. What
Oh,
they have, no, what they have required as conditional approval is to put curbing along the frontage and install a 5-foot sidewalk. What they typically ask for on any development that comes on a county road is provide a dedication of right-of-way, so that in the future, if they ever decide they want to make a widening, they don't have to go buy right-of-way. That's a standard requirement that they ask for. But they didn't ask for a physical widening of the roadway in this particular instance.
Okay, so the standard dedication, how wide would that typically be, Mr. Moskovich?
That I don't know. It depends on the type of roadway they have. But for an example, if from the center line of the roadway, they may ask for 25 to 35 feet. I don't know what the width is, but it depends on their master plan.
I'm sorry. So from the center.
No, I don't know what it is particular.
No. I didn't hear you correctly. That's why I'm asking you again. So from the center of the road.
Well, they measure, the right of way is measured from the center line of the road to a right of way. In other words, the sidewalk and all is usually typically within the public right of way. They ask them for an additional width, might be 10 feet, 5 feet, whatever that is, so that in the future, if they decide that they're going to widen the roadway, they don't have to buy additional land or property from development. And secondly, that the buildings and anything structurally that is on that property is outside that right of way. That's a standard thing. I just don't know what your width is.
I totally understand, but in the event there's that 25-foot thing or the sidewalk and then some, how much will that take off of the land, greenage and everything else that's being proposed for this property?
I don't know, but if I recall the site plan, the building is set back 50 feet from the right of way. So there's at least a 50-foot green area. And I can't see this road being much wider than another shoulder or so in the roadway. But
thank you, Mr.
But I don't have that. Basically, it's a 50-foot setback from whatever the right of way is that we have green area along the front.
I'm trying to pull up the picture. Does anybody have the picture so we can see it?
Well, ma'am, you've had 16 minutes. I'm going to have to cut you off now. You can come back the next meeting, but you cannot just monopolize the whole time. Do we have others waiting, Vina?
Fabulous.
Yes,
Thank you for calling in. Ms. Sawant?
Yes, we do. The next caller, number ending in 0022. The following caller will be number ending in 3592.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay.
Caller,
sir,
can you identify yourself?
Yes, I already been sworn in. I talked at the last meeting. The name is Kevin Prenderville.
All right, Kevin, I'll just caution you that you're still under oath.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
To clean up your Route 18 widening, about 7 or 8 years ago. I lived on the street for 30 years. The state came in and brought property at the end of Old Mattawan Road. It used to be a gas station. Their intent was to move the intersection to Marstead Road, redirect over the ramp, and make an eastbound entrance off the northbound of Route 18. Nothing ever came of that. The ramp going down 516 into 18 was just going to be shifted over. So we can all put that to rest.
Yeah, actually, sir,
Does that help you out?
I can agree with you on that because I actually represented a property owner who had their property condemned in that location and nothing ever happened.
Marlboro Road, they bought property on Kearney Avenue and they bought property down the old Mattawan Road, correct. So that hasn't been, that's been gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
All right, so if that helps you out, take it as you want.
Now, refresh my recollection.
We appreciate the historical
We got
comment.
something out of it. And on the record, some people shouldn't be calling in and listening to what they're talking about. So let's go on to subject 2. I've been watching these meetings, and every time you go to approve it, you want your building designed as the same in the area. Now, going to 5-story building in a historic area isn't being the same. I don't oppose to the assistant living. I oppose to the 5 stories. All right, so that's all I got on that. And then the third thing is the traffic study. Right now, I'm in a battle trying to get the police down here. I've been talking with the captain, and I got phone calls into the mayor. The traffic along this road is unbelievable. Between the dump trucks, the tractor trailers, and everything else going on. If you look at past history, you see people were killed on this road, and you have multiple accidents taking out telephone poles and demolishing cars. You can look on your records. I'm not fabricating those stories. So I truly believe more traffic coming on this road is not going to help no matters whatsoever. So if you should approve and go ahead with the plans on the demolishing of this building, how are we going to remove the debris and get the new stuff in? Are we going to use Old Mattawan Road?
Oh, we'll ask that's a good question for the engineer, I would assume. Mr. Turner, you're here?
Yes, I am here. And if you could just restate the question, please. I'm looking up a.
Sure. If the board approves it, if they approve it and we go ahead with this matter, when we go to the demolition of the building, how are we going to remove the demolition debris, and how are we going to bring in the new supplies? Well, are we going to use Old Mattawan Road?
Yes, they'll have to use Old Mattawan Road. There's no doubt about that. That's the only access into the property.
Okay, so within your traffic study, I read that the speed limit is 25 miles an hour, but we only have a 4-ton weight limit on the road. I got to repair the walls in my house because of the truck traffic going up and down the street. You only have a 4-ton limit. You have a school at one end and a bridge on the other end. So I know personally, I work construction, so I know an empty flatbed trailer, you're talking 5-ton already. So without nothing in it, you're still overweight. So I just want to address how we're going to move, material back and forth, being oversized loads.
Well, I think
that's something to think about.
Sure. No, it's absolutely something to think about. You're right. And it's a good question, but it is the way in and out of this property. It will have to be done in a manner that will not have any impacts on that road. And if they do have any impacts on the road, they're going to have to repair it.
All right. But repairing it don't solve the matter of running up and down the street. Because you and I both know nobody does 25 miles an hour on the street. Anybody sitting on this board could go down this road, and you can see that. I looked on the plan. You had your construction entrance on that would be the northeast corner going in and out of the property.
Yes, the northeast corner, correct.
Right. Can't we put a temporary entrance off that Route 516 ramp if we go ahead with the plans? To have your construction come in and out of there.
The issue is that it's a DOT jurisdictional ramp. It would be their jurisdiction, and it's highly unlikely that we'd be able to get a permit to do that from the NJDOT, given the fact that you've got alternate access into this property. My opinion.
All right. I'm just highly concerned about the traffic. And the lady that spoke the first time out of the box, she is not telling no lies. I'm telling you, you'd probably be better off going down Raceway Park and doing a quarter mile than sitting on this road and trying to get out. So That's all I have to say. I thank you for your attention.
Well, we,
Thank you, sir.
we appreciate you calling in, sir, and filling us in on the information, and we appreciate your concern in the matter. The board takes note, and it will be part of the permanent record, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
night.
Ms. Sawant, do we have any more calls?
Yes. Next caller, number ending in 0955.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Ken Short.
Mr. Short, let me swear you in, please. If you can please raise your right hand, although I can't see you. You can
Raised.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God.
Okay. Please state your name, spelling your last name and address for the record.
My name is Ken Short, S-H-O-R-T. I live at 13 Pemberton Drive, Matawan, New Jersey, 07747, which is actually in Old Bridge.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Actually, I have a statement, and then also we had presented, a group of us had actually had the opportunity to meet with the builder and developer. We are in support. We were a little taken back by the age restriction tonight, and we would ask that the board reconsider their age restriction and possibly, if permissible, add a special needs. There's a growing need for independent living for the special needs community in our town. We actually met with the developer, and we explained this to him when in a conversation that we were having. And I do have a letter from a group of citizens. We did present it to the board. We mailed it, email and hard copies to the board secretary. If I could read that letter into the record.
Mr. Short, I'll let you read that because I believe I let a member of the public read a letter last public portion. So go ahead. I'll let you do the same.
Thank you very much. Dear Chairman Sullivan and members of the board, we, the undersigned residents of Old Bridge, write to you in support of granting the necessary variances and approvals to the Vision Stream LLC independent assisted living facility being proposed at 105 Old Matawan Road, Block 8002, Lot 13. This project would bring much needed residences to Old Bridge for our special needs and senior citizens in our community. Locating the project in this part of Old Bridge would help revitalize what almost seems to be a forgotten section in our town of Old Bridge. The positive benefits of this to unique regional project for our special needs and senior communities would far outweigh the possible impacts to the few residents neighboring the proposed project. While traffic and infrastructure must be addressed, we believe as a whole this project is an excellent use of the existing property and an excellent path forward. And that letter was signed by 74 residents of the town.
All right. I'd like you to, actually, I did happen to see a copy of that letter today, so I do have a copy of it. I'm just going to make a comment on both letters that were read into the record this evening and at the last hearing. Generally, they are considered hearsay, unless those 74 individuals wanted to basically state for the record that they signed that letter, and I believe there were probably an approximate number who signed another letter at the last hearing. But in light of the COVID-19 situation that we presently have and that it's difficult for people to get to hearings, I think the board can basically provide whatever weight they want to these letters that were read into the record and signed by residents of the community. Generally, they are considered hearsay. However, I would not want to deprive any citizen of Old Bridge their rights under the 14th Amendment of the New Jersey Constitution and the U.S. Constitution to exercise procedural due process. So, but the board can, of course, attach whatever weight they want to those comments.
Will the board get copies of these before the next meeting?
Yeah, Kim, I think you're on mute.
I physically have the letters. I just received them.
Okay, so Kim, you can provide a copy to the board members, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Short.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Appreciate the time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Short. Ms. Swan, do we have another caller?
I don't see any hands raised at this point.
Okay.
let's, Jim, maybe wait 30 seconds just to make sure. No, okay, now I see, I see someone's hand raised.
There's a hand.
Yeah, okay.
Number ending in 4540.
Caller, please identify yourself.
Nieto. Hi, my name is Sebastian Nieto. I was sworn in at the last meeting. I was the person that requested something to be done for where our children wait for the bus, and I appreciate that that was taken into consideration. So that's my first point. I guess I'm sworn in already. I don't know if I need to do anything.
Yeah, I was going to say, sir, you're still under oath.
Okay, great. Thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Peter Peretta. I'm sorry if I'm killing your last name. What's the height? Because, you know, we talked about as short as possible or as low as possible between floors, but what is the height of the building in itself once all the drawings, once it's built?
Peter Peretta, still
Is
there?
Mr. Peretta still there?
Yes, I am. I'm unmuting and putting on the video. The height at this point is 60 feet.
Okay. And what is the highest house around the area? I'm just trying to figure out the differential between the highest house in 150 feet around from the new building.
I don't know. I would defer. What is the zoning code's highest limit on a house? Typically 35 feet to the peak
35.
the peak of an A roof. So this would be slightly more.
Okay, but I know the limitation on the height would be 35, but if you look around in our neighborhood, I don't think anything gets anywhere near that. Probably the highest would be maybe 25, 28, which again, as I stated on my last appearance, I'm not opposed to the redevelopment. I just think the building in itself is a little too high, and that's why I would like for the board to reconsider the permission for them to build something that high in our neighborhood. Also, I have a question for Mr. Miskovich related to the traffic study, where I think somebody at the last appearance said that Old Matawan Road is used as a back channel for Englishtown Road and 516, and usually around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, the traffic goes all the way past Kearney, almost to the point of where the new building or where the building is you know, about to be redeveloped. And considering that all these people living in this building will have to be moved in vans or cars, services, how will that affect, you know, what are we adding is not just the people that will be living there, but also all the movement of people going to doctors and any other visits that they have to make because they will not be able to move on their own. Would you like to elaborate on that, considering what the rules are?
Just bear with me a minute. Well, number one, that kind of activity where they'd be taking for doctor's visits and things like that, kind of during the day. They're not during normally the rush hour periods. So they're off-peak type of activities. The number of trips that make is very small. They have one van that might be going out. So by the time you figure a round trip wherever they're going and back, it might be one, they're going out and coming back maybe the same hour or a bit later. I don't think that generates any kind of real traffic impact in that instance. And so I don't know if that answers your question.
It's something else to keep in mind, and you know, that worries the people that live on this road. As I mentioned before, there's no sidewalks. It's a dangerous road, as one of the neighbors said before. the accidents, and anybody that wants. It's a very busy road, as you guys know. It's a county road, and that is something that we want to bring up to the board too. The last thing I wanted to mention is we keep talking about School Street, and as one of the neighbors said before, when Route 18 was rebuilt about, 10, 12 years ago, School Street became basically it's not even a dead end. It doesn't even exist. If somebody takes a little field trip here, it's not even there. And it goes into a guardrail. And when you look at the drawing, it looks like it's something massive. And in reality, it's just, it has to be redone, if anything. And it doesn't even show anymore on Google Maps. So yes, it exists in paper, but it doesn't exist in reality. It's not even straight, and it does show straight in the maps. So anytime anything goes around, and we're planning on using School Street, I don't think the space is there for anything to turn around for a truck, for a car, for a van. And I would like for members of the board, if they just drive by, pull up to behind the building, and where the garage is and the dental building is, and you'll see that there's not really what it's called a street. It's not actually a street per se. That's more of a statement than a question to anybody here. I don't have anything else. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Munoz, thank you for calling in. The board takes note of all your commentary, and it is part of the permanent record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sawant.
I see no hands raised.
Okay, Mr. Sachs, do you think it would be okay if we close the public portion at this?
Yeah, I think we can at this point.
You have a problem with that, Mr. Clauser?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, I'm going to close the public portion for this matter this evening. This is 3719Z Vision Old Bridge LLC, Vision 3 LLC. There will be an opportunity. This matter is not going to be voted on tonight. And in fact, there will be probably more testimony. We haven't even heard from a planner yet. Matter of fact, not probably, there will be more testimony. And there will be more opportunity for those to call back in. I'll turn it back over to you for now, Mr. Clauser, with any final words.
No, thank you for the time. We could find out the next hearing date is July. I think the next hearing date for which I'm available is July 16th. I think you have another hearing date later in the month, but I have other hearings that night.
There's just one in July.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the only one.
So if we could be carried to that without any further notice, as a courtesy, not under the legal notice, I will again send the new meeting information.
Yeah, that's fine, Mr. Clauser.
What date are we getting?
July 16th?
July 16th, 2020.
All right, if you're watching at home or you're listening, paying attention, that what was just said, July 16th
Yes.
will be the next meeting date for this particular application. If you have any interest in it, you will get notice of the hearing on that date. And I would assume, I don't know, but I would assume we might still be doing Zoom at that point. So you'll have to tune into us as you are watching us tonight. So thank you, Mr. Clauser, and thank you all your witnesses this evening for their cooperation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. At this point, Mr. Sachs, you have anything? Because I'm gonna take a recess now. So for the stenographer and for all the board members, should they need to run away from the computer for a few minutes. I would remind everybody, please mute and turn your video off so your picture isn't running. And for those of the public, I'm going to grant between 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully closer to 5, and then we're going to have the last application. We'll start the last application for the evening. Okay? There'll be a short recess, 5 to maximum 10 minutes. Why don't we call the meeting back to order? Ms. Silverman, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Dewhurst? You raised a hand.
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Kilduff?
Here.
Mr. Scagna?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Psychowski?
Here.
Mr. Stoner?
Yeah.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Sachs?
Here.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Here.
Ms. Swan,
Here.
Mr. Hart,
Here.
Mr. Lavala,
Here.
Ms. John,
Here.
and me, Kim Silverman.
Thank you, Ms. Silverman. This is going to be the final matter for this evening. It's 3819-Z, Old Bridge Rifle and Pistol Club. It's a block 8006, lot 6. Correction, I think that looks like lot. It's on Jake Brown Road to reorganize, reconstruct, and modernize an existing outdoor shooting range. Major site plan preliminary and final with a D variance. Peter Clauser is representing the applicant. Sir?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Walker.
as a former member who had a problem with the Pistol and Rifle Club, I'm going to recuse myself from this testimony and leave the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Walker,
Thank
this
you,
will
Mr.
be
Walker.
the final matter of the evening anyway,
Thank
so
you, Mr. Walker.
we thank you for your time, sir, this evening.
Good night.
Good night, Bruce.
Mr. Psychowski obviously is going to be voting, and Mr. Stoner is voting as well. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, for Debbie, Peter Clauser with the firm Halbert Pape on behalf of the applicant, Old Bridge Rifle and Pistol Club. This is an application for site plan approval and use variance relief. There's also some waivers that the applicant is requesting as part of the application. The Old Bridge Rifle Club it has been, I understand, I think we're just going to do our first witness this evening. I'll describe who the witnesses are, but the late hour, we're going to present the operations and what is going on here, and then we'll conclude. The club has been part of the township of Old Bridge since the 60s, over on Maple, and then later became part of the community out off the end of Jake Brown Road as the outdoor portion of the range. And Kevin, our first witness, will take us through that a little bit. This is an application where the club has an opportunity to realign, redesign, and modernize the existing range. There are 9 ranges out there now. A few of them will be turned and some will be added, and it'll create a total of 13 ranges. 4 new ranges will be added, and then the much needed parking lot is going to be installed at the site. And otherwise operate as it has. The access is proposed to remain the same. The club membership is proposed to remain the same. There's no change in activity that's proposed as part of this application. It's simply an opportunity to modernize, reorganize the range, and create a much needed parking area out in the field. The presentation this evening is, the presentation will be, not all of them this evening, through 3 applicants, through 3 witnesses. Kevin Ball is the president of the club, Jay Patel from Crest Engineering as design engineer, and then Allison Coffin is the professional planner. The variance relief that's requested is the club is a pre-existing non-conforming use, so the modification to the site triggers D variance relief. We're also asking for variance relief to allow storage and containers out at the property, which has occurred for a number of years. And then there's waivers associated with the design of the parking lot and the landscaping. And these variance relief that's requested with the outdoor storage and the waivers, parking design and the landscaping really stem from 2 overriding issues. This is a private facility. It is not attended to by the public. That'll go to some of the parking lot design. These are people that are familiar with the area, that are currently parking in sort of gravel area now, and sometimes on the ranges when necessary. And then second, the range, as you'll see when Jay testifies and brings out the aerial photographs, the range itself it's heavily wooded. It's very secluded. So some of the landscaping and buffering that would normally be associated with a site that's visible and as part of the visible community just don't make sense here. So if I could, I'll begin and conclude this evening with Ken's testimony. If I could have him sworn, and I'll introduce you to his relationship with the applicant.
Mr. Ball, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. I think you have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Thank you. Okay. There you go. Actually, you muted yourself again.
There we go.
Now we're good. Okay. Thank you. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, and affiliation with the applicant.
My name is Kevin Ball, B as in boy, A-L-L, and I'm currently the president of the Old Bridge Rifle and Pistol Club.
Thank you very much, sir.
Kevin, how long have you served as the president of the club?
5 years now.
How long have you been a member of the club? Part of the club?
I joined in 1999. 2 years later, I got talked into running for a position on the board of trustees, and much to my chagrin, I got elected. And I've been a trustee now for 19 years. I've served about 10 years in an officer's position, and the last one is the president for 5 years.
I made a statement that the club has been around since the 60s over on Maple, the indoor range. Is that accurate?
The club has been in existence since '63. The property on Maple was obtained a little bit later than that. They were actually using the police range back in the day when we were called the Madison Township Rifle and Pistol Club. So we changed, of course, in the '70s when the town changed. So.
How long has the outdoor range been out there on that property?
Before I got here in '99. I believe that there was an agreement made with the Brunettis somewhere around 1990 with a formal lease being signed in '92.
And yeah, you continue to be tenants on the property.
Yes, every year.
The club is accessed through what is essentially a private drive that begins at the terminus of the improved Jake Brown Road. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And there's well, actually, let me back up a little bit. If you could, I tried to describe for the board the rearrangement of the ranges and the inclusion of a parking lot. Did I accurately describe that? You have 9 ranges out there now. Some of the ranges, as Jay will describe, are going to be realigned so they are all in the same line with rows of ranges next to them, and you're going to end up with 13 ranges out there. Is that accurate?
That is correct. The 3 that were turned was only to bring conformity to the whole range, but it also added the ability to keep the sun at your back during the course of the day, which is, if you're shooting a firearm, it's not good to have sun in your eyes. So we were able to get this idea together to change it all and make it all uniform, and everything, all of the ranges should be pointing due north.
So now all of these ranges that we just discussed are accessed by a private drive that's maintained by the club. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I know one of the comments in the report from Nicole, I just want to get your commitment to this on the record, is that the entire drive be at least a minimum of 20 feet in width, and you've indicated that that's possible to do.
Yes, it is. The only problem we might have would be if there was any trees in the way, and if that were the case, we would just contact Gary Lavello, ask him to come out and determine the value of the trees, whether or not compensation is needed or not.
With regard to the access, we met out on the site with a couple of fellows from the fire department at Tom Hart's direction, and they indicated to us out on the site that they had no issue with the access for emergency vehicles as it was.
Yeah, that's what they told me also, yes.
Part of the use of the site and part of the relief that's being requested is that there are a number of storage containers out at the site. Could you share with the board a little bit about how those containers are used?
2 of the containers are for maintenance, grounds maintenance. That's where we keep all of the tools, ground tools, weed whackers, lawn mowers, lawn tractor, that type of thing. The other trailers are used by the leagues. The leagues use different types of targets, different shooting arrays and what have you, and they store them in their own trailers. They're mostly all steel. They need to be kept out of the weather as much as possible. So these are used, trailers are used for storage in that manner. Also, we have 4 small range trucks that we also manage to squeeze into there. And that's where they get locked up.
And then when the firemen were out there, they asked us about what were stored in the containers and if there were any fuel sources that are stored in any of these containers, that they either be stored outdoors or that they have appropriate placards on the containers. And you've either done that already or have no issue in complying with that.
That's all been taken care of. They made the recommendations when they were out there. I think it was only a week later, the vice president of the club went out and bought basically a cyclone fence cage. I think you know what I mean. It's attached to the side of one of the trailers now. And that's where the propane tanks and the gas containers are stored, which is acceptable to the fire department. However, there are trucks stored in there. They have gas in their tanks, so we've also labeled the trailers.
So I wanted to get some of that out of the way, and some of those specific issues that we wanted to address. I indicate that you're not anticipating any real change to how the club operates, or in fact, even the membership as a result of these approvals. Is that an accurate statement?
That's accurate. The main, what we want the most, the biggest thing on our bucket list is the parking. We need the parking very, very badly. We end up double parking, triple parking sometimes. Sometimes we have to shut down a range. That's really not a solution. It'd be similar to a grocery store shutting down the meat department so they have a place to park their shopping carts. It just doesn't work. It's not a solution. We would like to be able to have dedicated parking so that we can keep all range serviceable and in use at all times.
So in the design, you've instructed Crest, and Crest created 120 parking spaces in a contiguous parking field. The professionals for the township have pointed out to us that a recreational use of this size under the ordinance probably would require somewhere around 60 parking spaces. So the $1 million question is, why do we want more spaces than are really needed out there? What's your experience out there, and what's the activity that generates this?
Well, I can say that we have 1,000 members, and if 10% come to the range, that's 100 cars. And now this is a day that is just a beautiful Saturday with nothing on the calendar. All ranges are open, available for use by all members. And if it's a beautiful day, you can expect to get anywhere from 90 to 100 cars out there with no problem. The members don't have too much of a problem working in to get time to shoot with other members. They have a problem triple parking.
Okay. Now, what about the league activity that occurs out there, or the competition activity that occurs out there that some sorts creates a glut in the range that requires you to close some of the ranges down?
Well, it's basically the same situation. We try and limit them to 80 members in the big leagues, no more than 80 shooters. But when you have 80 people competing, you're going to have other people there to support the match. You're going to have range safety officers, range officers, and they're all there to help grease the wheels to make
Hello, I can't hear anything.
Oh. Where did you stop hearing, Debbie?
I can't hear anything.
I'm going to, Mr. Chairman, if I'm, may I call? I'm going to give Debbie a call, Mr. Chairman, if that's all right.
Go right ahead.
I have her cell phone number. Let me give her a buzz.
I can hear you now.
Okay, you can hear us?
I can hear you now. You were all frozen for a little bit.
What part did you lose us at?
The last thing I got was we try and limit 80 members in the big leagues, no more than 80 shooters, but when you have.
Oh, great. You didn't miss much. I think, Kevin, you were going down the line of testimony.
I'll continue where Deborah lost it. When you have 80 shooters, you're going to have support people on the range to help manage and move targets, set the targets up before the match. And then during the course of the match, there's all kinds of buggy lugging that has to get done. Somebody's got to run an errand here and there. So the support personnel is going to bring it up to close to 100. And then all you have to do is have a few rubberneckers come out because their friends are shooting or competing and stuff. Now you got a few more people out there walking around just watching. They have to have a place to park their car too. This wasn't something that we just started 5 years ago. We've talked about this for probably close to 10 years. And it was 5 years ago is when we pulled the trigger and said we have to approach the landowner and approach the town to see if we can make some improvements out there.
So although the township has an ordinance for recreational uses, your instructions to Crest came from real detailed personal experience out at the site and historical repetition of what was occurring at the site.
Yes, pretty much so. There's not going to be very much different. No one has said, oh, because we're going to be getting a parking lot and a couple of small instructional ranges, we're going to add 2 or 3 leagues or increase this or increase that. No one has come forward to mention anything like that to me. They are just very, very pleased that there's an attempt made to improve our parking there. It is really the big thing for us.
Okay. Mr. Chair, the bulk of really Kevin's testimony, I think, was to be able to provide the basis for the parking that was requested. Jay is going to be able to share with the board, the design and the actual dimensions and how it all lays out. And when you see the size of the site and the availability of it. But before I conclude with Kevin, I just want to make sure I haven't prohibited you from sharing anything else with the board. But I think that was the information that we wanted to get across.
Hey,
Kevin?
why don't we just ask any of the professionals if they want to ask Mr. Ball anything?
Sure.
And see if anybody from the panel does. And I guess we'll certainly have to take any questions that may come from the public. Ms. Swan?
Sure. Mr. Ball, with the trailers, can you elaborate, like, how many trailers do you have on the site? Because I visited this site and I actually went with the zoning officer. We noticed that there were a couple of trailers on site. And I did get an email from the building department indicating that there are a lot of trailers on the site. So can
There are
you
7.
explain? Pardon me?
I think there's 7.
So out of the 7, how many do you use for storage? I know you mentioned that some of them are used as storage and some of them are used by the patrons of the business. So can you just explain that?
All of the trailers are used for storage. That's their purpose. They're just used to store different things. The maintenance, as I explained, the maintenance people, the grounds crew team, they have 2 trailers, and that's where they keep all of their ground care equipment at. The other 5 trailers are the leagues, and that's where they have all of their shooting targets and steel, everything that they need to set up their ranges.
So at any time, there are 7 trailers?
Yes, these trailers are actually contained like shipping containers. They sit on,
Right.
they're not on wheels or anything. These are construction trailers, I guess, containers. I used to call them Connex boxes in the Army, but they have different names for them now.
The reason I ask is one of the comments of that came from the construction official was that trailers cannot be used as permanent structures based on building code requirements. And if these are structures that remain on the site all the time and are used for storage, I would want to talk with the construction official and find out what his concerns were. From planning perspective, outdoor, these trailers would be considered as outdoor storage and would require a variance. So I'll hold off from any other comments on the outdoor storage for now, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swan. Ms. Shapiro?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any comments at this point.
Okay, Mr. Hart?
Yes, Jim, thank you. I would just like to agree with Peter and Mr. Ball that my men were out there, and I'm probably the only one that's ever been back there all the years that it's been there, since I've been in the fire department since '81. But the trailers did concern us. I'm glad that they did placard them, so if we ever did go back there for a fire, that the men would know what was there. Just on the trailers themselves, this town has so many areas that have containers on them, mainly Bordentown Avenue, Cheesequake Road, never mind 35 and 34. You know, it's a tough thing to say you can't store anything in them, but yet they're all over the town. So I just wanted to bring that up to the board that this happens everywhere. Bordentown Avenue, if you ever drove on it, it's all containers. Cheesequake Road where Manzo paving is, all containers. That's what the people put in them. They put their storage, they work their trailers, they do parking on these sites. So pretty much they're doing the same thing. So I'm not too concerned about the trailers, just that they're labeled and people know what's in them if we ever went back there. So at this point, Jimmy, that's all I really wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Okay, but apparently suggestions made by you were already handled.
As Mr. Ball mentioned, we haven't had a chance with this whole pandemic to go another ride out there. So eventually, hopefully before the month's over, we'll take a ride out there just to verify everything that concerned my men when we were out.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Nicole, did I get you? You have anything?
You did, and I had mentioned that I had nothing for Mr. Ball.
I'm getting tired, so I forgot. Mr. Lavallo, anything for Mr. Ball?
No, nothing for Mr. Ball at this point. When I get to Mr. Clauser, I have 2 questions for him.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sachs, anything at this point? You're muted, Larry. Go ahead. Nope. You're okay. Is that what you want to say? Nothing? Go ahead, Larry. Now you're unmuted.
Yes, I'm okay.
Okay. I'm going to go to the board members, Mr. Clauser, if you don't mind.
Please do.
From Mr. Scogno? Nothing. Ms. Colduff? No. Mr. Connor? He's good too. Everybody's good. Mr. Dewhurst, you haven't spoken all night.
No.
I guess you're not going to know either. Mr. Stoner?
Nothing.
No, he's good too. And Mr. Psychowski?
No questions.
All right, and I have none either at this point. So having said that, I think we need to go to the public portion for this evening. Is that okay with you, Mr. Clauser?
Yes, considering I see 0 attendees.
That's good.
Well, we'll have to see. This public portion is going to open now. It's 3818Z Old Bridge Rifle and Pistol Club. If you have any questions or comments at this time, we would ask you to call in now. Maybe we could put the number up again.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Dina?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm just
Okay.
trying to pull up.
She's trying to pull up the number.
There's no one on hold now, right?
No,
Okay.
not one person.
I will give them the courtesy of a minute or two to, once we get the notice up.
Of course.
And quickly.
Bear with me. I'm having issues with it.
You have someone?
No, I'm having issues with
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
There we go.
There are no callers. There are no callers.
Mr. Klaus, your next witness will not be tonight, correct? You're going to have another witness at the next hearing, your planner?
Yeah, we'll have Jay from Crest will take us through, and then we'll have Allison will be the planner to conclude.
Okay, great. If you are watching at home, now is the time to call in. The phone numbers should be up on the screen, either on YouTube or on CATV 15.
Still none.
Okay, we'll give it another minute.
Okay.
See.
Calls yet.
Nobody.
Yeah, I don't see anybody.
Nothing?
Nobody.
All right, the time is 10:44. We've given about 2.5 minutes, I believe. You feel that's satisfactory, Mr. Sachs?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. If someone wants to make a motion to close, we can do that.
Well, Mr. Claus, you any final comments here, seeing as I'm going to close the public portion at this point? There will be obviously another public portion for those during the next scheduled hearing when Mr. Clauser presents more witnesses on behalf of the applicant. Any final comments, sir?
No, I would just like to confirm that we're carrying it to July 16th as well and without the requirement of any further notice.
Ms. Silverman?
So we're gonna have the same type of notice, just the passwords and the way you're doing it for the other one, right?
If that's necessary, we have the other one we had people appearing, so that was why I volunteered that. I leave that to the board's discretion. No one appeared tonight. I'm surrounded by a lot of commercial use of trees.
Mr. Clauser, just out of an
Anybody in
abundance
there?
of caution, I think I'm going to
Fine.
request that you do the same thing.
I needed you to do that.
You can notify the tree. You can notify the trees.
I will let them know.
Okay.
All right, so this will be scheduled for those watching at home for July 16th with further notice for the webinar. Mr. Clauser, thank you, and Mr. Ball, thank you for appearing this evening. We appreciate your information.
Thank you for
And we
hearing.
Appreciate your patience.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Once again, I appreciate all the efforts that are made so that we can continue meetings and so that I can keep working. It's very important, and I
Just
really
when we
appreciate
get
it.
the hang of it, Peter, they're probably going to put us all back in the courtroom.
I don't know what's better. I'm not sure. I haven't figured. The best part is, and as everybody experiences this, the ride homes are terrible. And the fact that I stand up now and walk out into my living room is wonderful. I really, really like that.
Well, there's
And the ride homes on no nights are even worse. So that's usually when I call my mother and they told me no. Have a good night, everyone.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Patel, for being here, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank
you. Ms. Silverman, is there any further business to bring before the board this evening?
Nothing for tonight. Our next meeting is June 18th. We will send invites again. I'll keep you all up to date and we'll go from there.
From a legal standpoint, Mr. Sachs, what is the vibe about how long this is going to carry on? I saw the volumes in the local, or the reporter that came through on all the zoning, on all the issues about doing webinars. So obviously it's a thing of the future, it looks like, huh?
Yeah, well, I think it's a thing of the future. I think as soon as, I think what'll happen is when they open the courts, that's when they'll start opening up public meetings. And I don't envision that happening until the middle of the summer.
Okay.
Well, off the record, I spoke to an assignment judge in another county, not our county. And he felt that there was going to be a soft opening July 1st, but that it would be very limited in the courthouses. So who knows? Maybe July 16th we'll be together. We'll see.
We'll see. Ms. Shapiro, anything from you?
Mr. Chairman, I think last meeting I was a little bit ambitious in saying that I was going to have a presentation on the courtroom this meeting, probably looking at sometime in July for a presentation on what we're doing. We're still in the conceptual phase, and I'd rather, get that down pat before I present that to the zoning board and to the planning board. So I just want to make sure that you know that I haven't forgotten, but it's in the works.
That's quite all right, but thank you for throwing yourself under the bus there. Ms. Sawant?
Yeah, sure. Larry, do you
Yes.
want, since we all are available now, do you want to discuss Oak Tree Plaza issue, which recently popped up? And do you want to fill in the board on what has happened?
You know what, Bean, I think I'm going to hold off until, let me see what Mr. Gouen submits, because I had a discussion with him today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we can talk about it at the next meeting.
Sure.
Okay.
Anything else then? Anyone on the board? None? Well, I hope everyone has a good weekend. I'm going to ask somebody to move for adjournment.
Motion.
Is all in favor, say aye.
It's because Bruce wasn't here, I win.
There we go. Listen, as the gentleman
Yeah.
mentioned it,
That's-
everybody have a safe.
Everybody be safe.
Yes, have a
Safe
good
drive home.
one, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Safe.
Good night.